All right, shalom, shalom, family. I'm using a different app today. I'm using the StreamYard. Amen. Shalom, shalom, family. So before we start, let's start with the Lord's Prayer. So bow with me as we say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path, and guard us from evil. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, amen, amen, family. So I put this note in the description. This is actually made for phones. I actually designed this thing to go and scroll with a phone. But today we're actually going to go about it on the computer. So the first thing I want to show is important. I'm just going to let this play a little bit. Now, this is just going to be information telling a little bit about DNA information. Now, if you're new to DNA information, that's good. That you can actually learn this thing. This is what we're going to do today. Is learn all these things. So I'm going to play a couple things. Not going to play them all, as this note is actually going to have longer videos that I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'm just going to play pieces of these things.
Two sisters take the same DNA test. The results show that one sister is 10% French, the other 0%. Both sisters share the same two parents and therefore the same set of ancestors. So how can one be 10% more French than the other? Tests like these rely on our DNA to answer questions about our ancestry. But our DNA actually can't tell us everything about who we are or where we're from.
So remember, it's very important to know that the DNA doesn't completely tell you who you are. That requires discernment, and it doesn't tell you exactly where you're from. That also requires discernment. Also, got to pull up extra information to find out those things. All right. So it's actually, I'm going to read this to you. First, it is important to know this about DNA tests. Though they tell you possible location of the origin of people, this is never to be taken as an authoritative piece of information. Rather, the best thing about DNA tests is that they show you a little bit of what is in you, right? What you're connected to, right? What is in you and who you're related to. For example, the Y chromosome. That's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to look at the Y chromosome. And I'm going to show you why we're going to be looking at that. The Y chromosome shows us what further you originated from. Yeah, DNA tests have a much value as pretty much for the sake of understanding. You got to know the Bible if you want to understand why is actual DNA information actually important. Because understand, if you're not trying to find out who, like if you have someone, if you have a baby and you try to find out if the baby's really related to you, that's a different story. But for just someone just wanting to know, it's not really a benefit unless they know what they're looking for in specific. So if you know the Bible, you can actually find out a very evident thing in the Bible, right? Because if the Bible is true, we should be able to find genetic information of Israel. So that's what we're going to do today. And what I did is I looked through many different types of people to try to find who is exactly is Israel. And I think this would be a very interesting one to go through. But let me show this. Let me know if these videos echo. I think StreamYard can talk while it's going, but I'll make sure.
This video will give you an introduction to the principles of human genetics before we look at how genetics can be applied to genealogy.
So I'm not going to play this one. This one just goes over the summary. I'm just go to an image here. This one just goes to a summary about how genetics it works. So we're going to be looking at the Y chromosome. So in the males, they all have a Y chromosome, but the way that it is in the male to male, how it's given male to male, it actually goes on continuum and is not broken. It's a straight chain. We'll get there and we'll talk about that. Now, what I want to do, I want to show you something because we're going to be climbing a genetic ladder. So remember, this note is actually made for phones, as for some reason this computer doesn't scroll the smoothest. But it's important to understand that many people actually don't know the Y chromosome of Israel. If you actually look for it in the details of the Bible, you find a lot of errors with some of the conclusions that's going on in the world today. And I noticed this a long time ago when I was studying this. But I want to show you that people they are looking for the Haplogroup of Israel. I want to show you one of these geneticists, 3920. I'll show you this geneticist. His name is, I believe, Dr. Nathan Jensen. I'm going to show you him real fast and what he says about some of these things, and that it is worth taking the time of trying to find the line of Israel.
Tribes of Israel. What would you say in regard to that question?
So you see what the question he's asking there? What is the Y chromosome of the 10 tribes of Israel?
If I'm understanding this correctly, it's sort of a question of the Samaritans. The northern tribes get conquered, judged by God. Judah hangs on for a while longer. And it's really a question of the larger Jewish diaspora. Can we identify the lineage of Abraham? Because they call Abraham their father. And the short answer is we don't have enough data yet to know for sure. But the exciting thing is we should know as we get more and more Y chromosome sequences from peoples around the globe. So it's a question I hope we'll have an answer to in the near future.
So I think the reason why they're actually doing a lot of the DNA tests that they're doing nowadays, I believe that the reason why they're actually doing that is because after they had discovered DNA, they're now just getting more experimental with what they can find. But there is, what I'm going to show you is information. There are people that are dedicated on trying to find the lines of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and finding the line of Noah where it splits. And I actually have some very interesting sources that we're going to talk about today. And it's going to be very groundbreaking. I think the most important thing is to know where it splits. Because there is evidence of Ham, Shem, and Japheth in our DNA, which is very amazing. I think it's extremely amazing, and it's going to be really interesting. I'll just show you that real fast. I'm going to jump right down to it. It's just a source that I found. I mean, I found it the other day, but I found a more deeper PDF right here. I want to show you this PDF real fast, but I'm going to go right back up because I want to go about this in a way where we all can understand it. But let me show you this PDF. I'm going to show you this because I think it's important to know where the 3 splits is. So this is a real PDF, right? From real geneticists and all that whatnot, right? University of Idaho. Go down a little bit. And I'm going to show you what they made here. You see this right here? We're going to talk about this. This is actually 3 splits. This is the split of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. All right, it's going to be a split of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and we're going to look at this. It's going to be very interesting because once you understand these letters, and it's easy. I'm going to show you. It's very easy. Once you understand these letters, you'll get it down. And the evidence is also in the female chromosome. In the female chromosome, you have L's and M's and N's and things like that. And there's also a 3 split. So this is matching. The female line basically matches the male line in a way. It's a little different with the female line. It's a little more complex, but the male line is clean cut. It's clean cut. I'm gonna close this. We're gonna see some interesting things, and you're gonna see the evidence of the Bible in the life of the blood of us all. Every single person who's here, we have evidence in our blood of the Bible. It's gonna be extremely amazing because once it's all put together, you're gonna understand that the life is in fact in the blood. I'm gonna show you another one that they also are trying to look for Israel. They're trying to find Israel and everything. Shalom, family. I'm going to show you this one now. Close this. And this one. 2:18. And the reason why this is important because once you start to see that the book that was written,
so that seems
these things are actually in reality, right? It's not about boasting over anyone or anything like that. It's about seeing the evidence of the Bible, right? You got some people who study the Ark and things like that. But today we're actually going to be studying some of the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Most hermetic pieces of information that you will see on a note, period, towards who is and who is not Israel.
This one gives some others an opportunity. Are the Israelites from Haplogroup E? Can you discuss this? I know you mentioned the Israelites and Haplogroup E at some stage, but do you want to talk further on that?
In episode 19, I think that's the correct number, we dealt with the history of Africa and saw that there's this group E lineage that's split several times. And one of the most intriguing splits is between E1, B1b, that's an ugly name, yes, and E1.
All right, I just had to reset the computer because I didn't have it plugged in. So let's keep going. So as you can see, this individual, he actually says it's worth looking at trying to find the haplogroup of Israel. So you can see he's basically talking about also E a little bit here,
A.
having some potential.
And the latter are much of sub-Saharan Africa, and the former, E1, B1b, are North Africa. And I went through the reasons why this appears to be the result of the Muslim Arab conquest around the time of Muhammad and the centuries following. What's intriguing is, so you have sub-Saharan Africa and perhaps the Arabian Muslims connected around maybe 500 BC, perhaps through Egypt or Nubia.
For the sake of understanding of clarity, the real Muslims, which are Ishmaelites, they are actually going to be related with Israel. We know that because remember, Israel and Ishmael, remember this, very important. They are actually, when we think of Isaac, right? Isaac and Ishmael are going to be brothers from Abraham. That's important to understand. And this time right here, this 500 BC, we're going to talk about these things because it's important to know some of the things that's going on with the Out of Africa idea. But for clarity, we're going to make it clear and possible to understand these things. So let's continue on and look at these things because we're going to be climbing the genetic ladder here. That's what we're going to be doing here. So this one is just information on the potentials that there is room to try to find Israel. Now, if you've seen, I did a video. I'm going to show you this real fast before I move on. I did a quick video. Now, if someone comes, I want them to understand we do look at all things. We do want to be fair and look at all things. My focus originally was looking at the J lineage. All the information that I found for the J lineage actually pointed away from them being Israel. Even Dr. Nathan Jensen, NT Jensen right here, I'm going to show you that he himself actually noted. I'm going to show you something. This is a very rare video, but he himself on this video, though he noticed some confusing things, one thing in particular stood out to me that he did. And it has to do with this image right here. It has to do with this image right here. And what it has to do with is this J lineage. It's important to look at this because I'm going to show you something why this actually is important. Let me just, in fact, I'm not going to go to this, but I'm gonna just explain it right here. What's on that video? What's on that video is that what he single-handedly does is that he basically says the J lineage, which actually, if you look it up, I'm gonna show you something. Do you know who? I was looking to see because they spell this a little weird. I'm gonna go to. All right, here it is. So did you know that they actually have something called this CMF, which is basically they say the Kohan, like the line of Aaron haplogroup. They actually call it the line of Aaron haplogroup. And they actually say that it's haplogroup J. And for the sake of understanding, haplogroup J and haplogroup J2, right? J1 and J2, they say that these are actually the Jewish Kohanim genetics. Now, I looked this up. I tried to find out and see if it was true. It is absolutely not true. And he also knows it. See, he himself actually puts J1 and J2 specifically these two lines as Indo-European. Now that he actually marks them as Japhetic. Now, the way that he has this, I'm going to show you that this is not right. But if you ever seen my video, I went over this already, that I, J, L, H, all these are connected. We know these are connected on the same branch. There's no doubt about that. No geneticist agrees with the way this splits. But just for the sake of understanding, he himself says J2 and J1 is Japhetic. So I want you to understand that's why we're moving forward and looking at other lineages now to see who it actually would be. And we want to make sure we split the thing right. We want to make sure we split at the right point. This is not the right split. That's why I showed you that picture earlier. Now, I wanted to show you that because I wanted to be fair, right? I wanted to go about this very fairly, so you know that I'm not going about it with hate. We have full love in this thing. I want to find Israel for the sake of understanding. I want to find the evidence in the Bible of the genetics. And that's what you're going to see today, the real informative genetic information. And you're going to see that a lot of people actually agree with it. Haplogroup J1 and Haplogroup J2 are Japhetic. It's important to know that is not the line of Kohan. So let's get a little summary of haplogroups. Let's understand, if you're new to this, that's why we're doing this like this, because you can actually learn what haplogroups is. Now, your level of advancement in this information all differs. For those that's really advanced in this information, please be patient. For those that may not be too familiar with it, but I'm going to show this information so that we can understand it.
Hi, I'm Elaine with the 23andMe customer care. You may be wondering, what is a haplogroup? Let me explain. There are haplogroup features if your traits are derived from maternal or paternal lines back thousands of years. You got your maternal haplogroup from your mom, got it from her mom, got it from her mom. You get the picture. Your haplogroup assignment basically lets you trace your maternal or paternal ancestry to one mutation at a specific place in time. Keep in mind, there are hundreds of tiny mutations that led to the formation of hundreds of different haplogroups, some of which are super small. Your haplogroup isn't always the best indicator of your recent ancestry, but it can be cool to get a sense of where your ancestors may have lived thousands of years ago. Haplogroups are a combination of letters and numbers that show you where you can be found in the huge haplogroup tree. For example, L2 is the most common haplogroup among both Africans and African Americans. Haplogroup H is extremely common among current-day Europeans.
Now, this is actually going over mtDNA, which is the female line of DNA. Doesn't go too deep into the Y chromosome, but that's just a great summary for what is a haplogroup. A haplogroup is basically grouping people in a similar group based on a certain mutation, which is actually, when we're looking at the Y chromosome, is going to be right in the center of the Y chromosome. Here's a faster little summary here. This one, just pay attention to this. As you can see, is only 20 seconds.
On an average of 1 in 1,000 base pairs. Researchers have shown that groups of SNPs occur in predictable patterns within sections of DNA. These inherited sections of 6 to 8 SNPs are called a haplotype. Within any one section of DNA, it is believed that there are only 3 to 5 different haplotypes throughout the entire population.
All right, I'm gonna put this right here. All right, so obviously that was a little older. Obviously got more information on those things, but I just want to give you a quick summary on what we're going to be looking at. What is a haplogroup and what are SNPs and all those things? Well, I'll go about those things very slowly and carefully so we understand them for the sake of understanding. Also understand this. DNA, unless it's found, like ancient DNA found in a certain location, DNA, modern DNA, we cannot take modern DNA and use that to find locational information. That's not how we use DNA. DNA is not used for finding locational DNA information. 445, let me show this real fast. We're gonna have different information that we need to find locational information. Let me just jump ahead here. So he just talks about pretty much locational information is not found in DNA. That's not how actually DNA is not actually for finding locational information. But if you do find an ancient body in a location, it is highly probable when you find multiple of them and they're in that same location that's usually where that people was in that time.
Europe, and some of them stayed. And that is probably where this quick surname for the Dutch came from, is actually from English. But if we go back further, of course, we find different surnames. We have the Norman invasion into England with we have earlier with the Angles and the Saxons invasion, the Viking invasion. So that's just what we know on a broad scale, just in Europe. We have these groups moving all over. So is it unusual to find, let's say, Scandinavian DNA in France? Well, no, because we know that the Vikings, invaded France. We certainly find it in England and in Ireland, but likewise, we also find English DNA in other parts of Europe. We find Italian DNA elsewhere. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody in those groups all has that, but it's not unusual to find something like that, yeah, your ancestors were from that place maybe at some point, but they were also from a lot of other places. And so pinpointing specific locations, I don't put much weight in that, basically because we really don't know what the DNA profile of the people that lived there 500 years ago was. We don't know what it was 1,000 years ago. We can assume that it's very similar to the ones that live there now that have had their great-grandparents. But if you imagine, hey, if your great-grandparents were all born there, but their parents were immigrants from somewhere else, well, now you've got a different DNA that has been put into that group. And so now you're classifying something as English DNA when really it should be classified as Dutch DNA or Polish.
Okay, so for the sake of understanding, if you get a DNA test, matter of fact, when I get there, I'll talk about it. There is different types of DNA tests. There are autosomal DNA tests. There are mitochondria DNA tests. There are Y chromosome DNA tests and the such. It's important to understand that a lot of them that aren't Y chromosome, they're going to give you a locational information, which is not going to be that valuable for the sake of understanding. It's not going to be that valuable for the actual migration of the peoples. Here's another one.
Another day of fact or fiction where I'm going to go through.
I think this is, let me make sure if this is the same one. Yeah, the same one. I'm going to close that. All right. So obviously the type of information that we need to go through is going to be the direct information that's going to be historical information. Now we're going to get to the meat. Are you ready to get to the meat? Now let's talk about the meat. Now, already after going over this and reviewing this a couple times, I actually realized something very, very simple to understand. If we go through some of the information, now first I'm going to give you the direct information, then I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show you that this is the line of Abraham. The line of Abraham is actually E1B1. Go down a little bit. What I'm going to show you, it's going to be the actual direct information to these things. All right. So the line of Abraham is going to be E1B1 P2. The line of Isaac is E1B1A V38, and Jacob's haplogroup is EM2. Let me show you right here. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So now this is actually in the E lineage. This is actually where we find the evidence of Israel. And I'm going to show you how we can actually find the evidence of Israel. We can find the evidence of Ishmael, and we can find the evidence of who is who in these lines. And it even tells us of this M2 because this is actually Abraham, this is Isaac, and this is Jacob. And it's actually important to know that the reason why we're going to look at why it mutated so fast, because a lot of people, they'll say mutations take a long time. Well, when it was Abraham's time, yeah, the mutations took a long time. But when it got to Isaac, because we're going to look at why it mutated so fast. And then when it got to Jacob, why it mutated so fast. We're going to look at that. Let's go down a little bit. So we'll come back to this to touch on that a little bit. And first, let's talk about the mutation rate. So it is scientifically proven, right? Mutation occurred. I'm actually put that occurs or occur. Yeah, occurs more in fathers that have children at an older age. Occurs. Let's just do that. All right. So for the sake of understanding, let me go right down to it. In fact, let me make sure I read this information as well at the top right here. It says right here in Genesis 21, and Abraham, actually, matter of fact, before we even read that, I want to show you this information. Dr. Nathaniel was putting out a paper. Now, a lot of people, as you can see, is a lot of names on this paper, as you can see right here. This paper actually is about, here's a clear sense of understanding it. This is up to 40 years old. It's basically letting us know, let me click this. It's basically letting us know that the older a male is, the more likely for a mutation. Now, this is a mutation on what is called a SNP. Now, a SNP is just what they use to find, when you got a haplogroup like E and all those things. And I'm gonna show you what are haplogroups. We're gonna work our way there as we work through the Noah. Haplogroups, for the sake of understanding, are going to be one line, but there's going to be what is called a SNP, a mutation, right? The older someone is, this is only up to 40. The older someone is, the higher the mutation rate, the higher they can have a mutation rate. So that means you can get a mutation within one generation if there is a extremely old age. For example, and remember, these are going to be the earlier people as well. They're not like us. They're going to be more earlier. Yep. That's right. That's right. Amen. So let's read how old Abraham was when he had Isaac. It says in Genesis 21:5, and Abraham was 100 years old. You see that? When he had Isaac. So that's high. 100 years old. Obviously, for a normal person, that's impossible. But for Abraham, Yah had him bring Isaac at 100 years old. And imagine how fast a mutation rate you will have. So that's why we can see one mutation rate within one generation. It says, and after that came his brother out. Now it's going to talk about when did Isaac have his, right? When did Isaac actually have Esau and Jacob? 60 years old. So you can see how fast this mutation rate is. This is only 40 years. This is mitochondrial. This is female DNA, but this is male. The males mutate faster than the females. The males line. So you can see how high that is, the high mutation rate. Go over here. So Isaac was 60 years old. Now Jacob's line was more confusing. It was a little more confusing, but it was not too hard to understand. It's actually important to know that Jacob first started having kids at 91, for the sake of understanding, just for give a quick summary. But the way that's understood right here, breaking down the age of Jacob when he got married and when he had kids. Once he got with Rebecca, with Rachel, for the sake of understanding, when he got with Rachel, that's when he was 91 years old. And that's when he waited 7 more years and brought up his children at the age of 98. So that's some very old ages. These are very old ages to have kids. So that's why we have high mutation rates. Very high mutation rates at an early stage here. So let's take a look here. I'm going to skip this. So this is actually going to be information on the MT DNA, which is the female DNA. You can see it has different haplogroups. I'm not going to go over it today because MT DNA is a little more confusing. It's a little more complex. It's not so clean cut as the Y chromosome, though it can be understood. We can understand it. It's possible to understand. We can find those 3 groups in it as well. It's definitely possible to find that, but it's a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not as clear as the Y chromosome. The reason why is because in the Bible, it actually illustrates to us that it's going to be through the male and the female, through the male's line. We're going to get that in Numbers 1. So let me show this real fast, as I think this is important. I want you to hear what this man says here. I think he says a very interesting statement here. It's only a minute long, but I think he says a very interesting statement to consider that DNA is not just a physical element anymore. Actually, DNA is actually an evidence of God, and many people know it. So I'm going to show you what he says here. I think it's really interesting.
If you look at DNA as a black box, it's the longest word we've ever discovered. Computer science language is used to describe it. The biologists were reluctant at the beginning to do this, but now they all accept it. Now, the very interesting thing is this, that a lot of the debate around this circles on the nature of explanation. What do we mean by scientific explanation? And it is a very common view that all explanation proceeds from the simple to the complex. And so you have all these evolutionary scenarios, which incidentally are being questioned these days by serious biologists, but I leave it aside. But you see, there's one area where the simple to the complex explanation does not work. And that is the area where language is involved. If you see your name written on Long Beach or something, 4 or 5 letters of your name, you infer immediately upwards to an intelligent input. No matter what mechanism put that there, you do that. Now, the fascinating thing, and I often suggested to my fellow professors. I say, look, you go into your laboratory and you see the DNA with 3.5 billion letters in exactly the right order. And I ask you, what's the origin of that? And you say chance and necessity. When you'll see anything with language on it, 4 or 5 letters, and immediately you say intelligent input.
Okay, so just to give the clarity, what he was basically saying there, he basically said that DNA is actually a language. That if you actually have the capability to understand what's actually written there, which is not hard, it's actually not hard at all. But if you actually examine what's actually written there, you can actually understand what it's actually saying. And that's what we're going to be doing today, is actually looking at what DNA is actually saying. As it says in Psalms 33:4, for the word of the Lord is right, and all his works are done in truth. Now, it's one thing about, now, there's a lot of people with a lot of great sources for history. But if we can match history with genetics, then what we can do is actually bring harmony to truth. We can actually bring a great big harmony to truth. Now, this part I'm going to skip. In fact, let me see if I want to here. In fact, I'm not going to skip this. Let's talk about this real fast. Now, the haplogroup that we're touching on, E, a lot of people will say it was in Africa. It's actually false. It's important to understand that the E haplogroup is actually named by the people a Middle Eastern haplogroup. Did you know that? Did you know that the E lineage is actually a Middle Eastern haplogroup by definition? Let me actually show you that right here. Let me just open this right here and show that and make sure I'm not muted. There we go. Amen. Yes. Thank you for letting me know that was background noise. I want to make sure everything's clear as possible. Let me show you something from here. Let me just let it load up. And I'm going to show you a very interesting quote. Very interesting quote from here. Just got to wait for it to come in. There it is. All right. Let me see. Let's see. Right here. Okay. All right. All right, so I'm gonna leave this right here real fast for a second, because first what I wanna do is I wanna go about this very carefully, and I want you to understand something about the E lineage and everything. I want you to first see what they say about it. In fact, I think that it is, let me actually open the PDF. We'll open the PDF so that we can just go and type it down right here. This is also gonna be in a note, but let me download that again, because I think it didn't completely download. But I want to show you something. I want to show you that they themselves actually call it a size of, yes. Let me show you something, because I want to show you this. All right. Let me find it on here. View page. Let's use find on page. I want to show you what it says about this haplogroup. Let's see. I just want to see if it's on this one. Okay, right here. Watch what it says right here. This is what they say. It says the Middle Eastern. You see what's saying right there? The Middle Eastern, right there. I don't know why it grabbed the top too. Why it highlighted the top? But right there, where it says the Middle Eastern haplogroups D and E. You see what's saying there? It just let us know that the lineages of D and E are actually Middle Eastern. And I'm going to show you that they are indeed Middle Eastern, and they know it. They know that it is Middle Eastern. Let me close this. All right. So first, this is some interesting information as I'm going to go over now just to show you. In fact, I'll skip this one. This one just has a little other information. This one too. Let me make sure 722, because I want to show you that yeah, this one. Let's go 722. This brother goes deep on some things here as well.
For there, they that carried us away captive.
I'm gonna go to this one. In fact, I want to go to these, but I'm gonna go right down to the Natufian and get right to it because that's gonna give the quicker summary. But if you want to see more information on where E is, you can see these things as this note would be in the description. It have timestamps, but I have another information that's a little better that I'm gonna go right down there because there are other sources where you can see right here on Underhill 2001. It proposed that E actually began in basically out of Africa. You can see E. Clyde, the Haplogroup DNA and everything. It basically says that it was more closer to Asia and things like that. But I'm gonna go down because when we get to it, I'm gonna show you a very great find that I think is enough to show that the E lineage is actually found outside of the African continent. In fact, I want to let you know that it says something right here. It actually lets us know. It actually talks about the traces of the original inhabitants of Africa were replaced. It says traces of these early inhabitants, however, can be observed today in these regions via the presence of the Y DNA haplogroups. Because listen to when I say this, the haplogroups A and B are actually going to be your Hamite haplogroups A and B. The haplogroups A and B and possibly C, who knows? C is one of those confusing ones. But A and B actually is going to be 100% of Ham. That's important to understand. If that's why it says A1A, A1B, A2, A3. And it says right here that the common ancestor or the common certain population says such as these type of populations. Now, I'm not going to go over who they are and everything, who are the Hamites and everything. That's not what I'm going to do today. I'm not going to talk about the Hamites right now. But it's really interesting if you get a look at some of these people and the difference between them for the sake of understanding. Let me click this because I want to show this real fast. Now, have you ever heard of the word Bantu? Right? If you ever heard of the word Bantu, you can just look it up. You can just type Bantu people. Right? What is Bantu people? You see where it says these Bantu people? Now, I want you to understand something about these Bantu people. What does Bantu actually mean? Bantu actually means people. Bantu actually means people, and is a name that's actually given to a people because they were migrated to Africa and they actually were expanding. They call it the people's expansion or the Bantu expansion. It says right here, Africa supports the suggestive of rapid expansion. Now, what it's going to let us know is that Africa and the land of Africa, there was a lot of people that actually went into Africa. It says because of the separation of two major waves around, you got to be careful on these years for the sake of understanding 3000 YBP for the sake of understanding the basic saying year before present, and the subsequence of isolation of many groups, basically letting you know that some groups were separate from others. Modern Bantu or people's languages can be divided in West and East Bantu. Basically, what it's letting us know is that there are two groups, like two major tribes that are actually going to be found in Africa that actually went there. It's important to understand that they actually know that they actually migrated there, that there was an expansion there, and that these people that went there that actually are in that area, a lot of them can be classified as West Bantu and East Bantu. Think about that. Now they're not north or south like they was in Israel, but now they went downwards and now they're settled west and east. It's very interesting to see these things for the sake of understanding. I just wanted to show you that, and I'm gonna go down further. Let's keep going. All right, so it's important to know that Ham is not Shem. It's important to know that. That's very, very important that Ham is not Shem and Shem is not Ham. In the same way as we see Japheth is not Ham and Japheth is not Shem. It's important to understand that. Now, there are actually three lines. I'm going to come back to this little image up here, but I'm going to go down as I'm going to come back to that image, as this is something that's good for later on. But let me go down for something. In fact, let me read this right here. The reason why I want to read this is because I want you to know that the lineages that I'm showing you are actually ancient lineages, right? Starting here, here, and here, because some have their own ideas on where they start. But the truth is Abraham starts at P2, Isaac starts at V38, and Jacob is at M2. Now, it's important to know after that comes a split of 12 tribes. I'm going to show you that in a little bit, that they actually have evidence that there's a split of 12 tribes. But first, let me show you that these are ancient branches, that no one is actually these branches today. So I asked a very specific question, as I have a few questions that I sent to Family Tree DNA just to understand some information that you sometimes can't find directly when you're trying to search it. But look what it says right here, because I asked them about basically which one was ancient, pretty much for the sake of understanding. And this is what they say. Thank you for contacting Family DNA. We won't predict you to E1B1A because I knew if I asked a question too direct, they would just say yeah or make it as basic as they could. But if I made it where I knew, because what I know is that there is actually another branch after this one, which is E1B1A1. And that's actually what everyone's connected to. But I wanted to ask this one to see if they would give the full detail to the answer, which is good. They actually did. It says, we won't predict you to E1B1A exactly, which is also known as V38, right? Because after that, it's going to be M2. However, we will predict you to M2, which is one of the major subclades of that haplogroup. Subclade, that's a mutation of the SNP. It's just talking about these are all going to be haplogroup E, but these are mutations. These are actually SNPs. These are subclades or subclads for the sake of understanding. Sub-branches for the sake of understanding. These are sub-branches. And this is going to be the last one. And then you're going to have the split of 12 original sources. It says right here, they will actually predict you to M2, which is one of the major subclads of that haplogroup. And being predicted to it would mean you would belong to E1B1A. This can be done with their lowest test for the sake of understanding and whatnot. Let's go down a little bit. So I just want to show you that what I'm showing you here are ancient branches that no one is today. So these branches right here are right before the split of the 12. These are ancient sub-branches that no one is today, but yet they are connected to them. Now, it's always important to understand that the line points to one father. One father. That's why you're seeing a haplogroup. Haplogroups are going to give us the answer that we need here. So here's a little summary of companies. I'm not going to play this video because I'm just going to explain this little picture right here. Let's just explain this picture. This is what I was talking about DNA tests. Now, in DNA tests, it's important to note, because I actually had to know this as well as in doing a lot of studying on this as well. It's very important to make sure if you go and take a Y chromosome test that the best company is, I believe, 23andMe. Well, let me see. Family Tree, my bad. At Family Tree, for the sake of understanding, is actually going to have the direct information. Are you an expert wanting detail on the Y chromosome or things like that? Do you want information on Y chromosome? Family Tree DNA will give you the information for that. That's what you want to go through. That's what you want to go to, Family Tree DNA. If you go to these ones, that's when you're going to start seeing percentages and other strange different things, right? Like, for example, let's just look up a simple DNA test. Here's a simple DNA test. Let's see a result. Let's see some results. Let's see. I want to show you an example. Here's an idea in a way. You see what you're seeing right here? You see how it's like percentages here? This is what happens when you actually are doing different types of tests, right? Sometimes with mtDNA and autosome DNA tests, you can get those different results like that. Let me close this one as well. So you don't want to do, like, for example, if you're trying to get just direct Y chromosome, you want to be careful which one you get and whatnot. Otherwise, you will have some ones that may be giving you a little too much than what you need for the sake of understanding. Now, obviously, the Y chromosome, there's 23 chromosomes. The Y and the X chromosome are going to be those last pairs. Your autosome test is going to give you extreme recombinations. That's why you're going to see different percentages, because all these recombine. But the Y chromosome, only the tips, which are called PAR, the tips actually go to recombination. But what they check is the middle. They actually check the middle. So when you get your DNA test, you're going to see the middle result there, for the sake of understanding. Let's go down a little bit. Now, what I want to do, I want to show you something. I want to show you something real fast. Now, remember, I was showing you this. There is a line here. Now, if you notice here, Abraham, let me go to a bigger one. right here. Amen. So this is the newer one. This is the older one. This is the newer one. This is going to be Abraham. And notice, I want you to see something really interesting here. Abraham actually gives forth Ishmael. Now, we did a whole video on the E1B1B and the evidence of it on who is connected to the real Ishmaelites. This is actually very interesting to get a look at. But notice here, there's Abraham. He has Ishmael. He has Isaac, right? Isaac has Jacob. Who does Jacob have, right? In fact, who does Isaac have first before we talk about who Jacob has? Jacob, before he is born, Isaac is with one wife and he has twins, right? So what does that mean if he has twins? The person has to be connected to Isaac, but on his own branch, not connected to the 12, but connected to his own branch. And do you know that there actually is a branch after V38 that is connected to V38, but is not connected to M2 and all the branches of M2? That is actually going to be what is called M329 or E1B1C. It's important to understand that this is actually E1B1A2. This is actually very interesting because this lineage, we only can find it in one people today. And if you look at some of their culture practices, like what they do here, they're actually dyeing their hair red. And this is actually interesting because if you actually look at this information, this is a direct evidence of Esau. This is actually a direct evidence of Esau. This is actually the people that I'm showing right here. These are people that have a tradition of dyeing their hair red. You can see right here, a little idea of it. Let's go back over here. I'm gonna go down. I think this one also has some stuff. This is a very interesting people. When I was doing some studying on them and everything and seeing their traditions and whatnot, they have some very interesting practices. That's just some information on that. Let's go down and see this. So they dye their hair red. Now, why do they dye their hair red? That's a really interesting thing. Why would they dye their actual hair red? It seems that they actually may have someone near to them that they have respect for. It seems to be a tradition that has great roots with them. It's obviously something that they find as appealing and something that they may have seen someone else have that they also find appealing to do. So you can see right here, they dye their hair red. Now, what's interesting is when I pulled out this is actually the whole branch, because if you try to open up the whole branch of some haplogroups, it can take you hours. But this one, E1B1C, this is the whole branch. This is the whole, all of it. This is everything that's in there. There's not a lot of people that have it. And that's because this is actually Esau. This line is actually the line of Edom, the line of Esau. And it's been cut short. Now, the reason why, because there's a lot of prophecy to that. There's a lot of prophecy to why we only see a small portion of Edom and Esau, for the sake of understanding. Let's go down. I just want to show you a couple of scriptures. Now, it's important to understand, why are these black? Why are they black? Because remember, Esau, though he was called red, he actually made it with the daughters of Canaan and 4 Hittite women and the women of Ishmael, right? Remember, Ishmael actually is going to be half Egyptian. He goes and also marries an Egyptian. So he's having more and more children that are Egyptian. Now, if you look at how the Egyptians are in that time, they were darker skinned. So that's why you see that a lot of times they're darker skinned. But we also know that he's with Hamites, right? Hittites and Canaanites. He was going on right there. Those are Hamites. So he's actually with Hamites, and that's who these are. They are actually going to be a darker lineage, but they are going to be E1B1C. That's who they are. They're E1B1C. And see, that's where we can see this evidence, and this is where they are. They're basically in Ethiopia, right? You can see them down in this area. It's important to know that when we talk about the Hittites, right, it's important to know that Ishmael obviously made it with those that were a little above the Levant, right where Turkey is. This is where we see that the last remnant of Esau, right here, the last remnant of Esau, right there. These are the last remnant of them. You can see that's very interesting when you take a look at some of these things. Also, it's important to understand when looking at some other information. Let me see, 14740. Let's see if this one has what I want you to see real fast. I'm gonna go to this one, 147 and 40.
No, let's read this
Just a quick information on Edom.
first, then I'll play the clip.
Let me know if it echoes.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry. You know what it is? I'm trying to get it in chronological order, you know. So I do apologize, Salaki. Okay, what have historians said about Rome and Edom? This is all found in this book, The People That History Forgot. So it says, let me read from, I'm going to read from half a sentence in, which probably won't make sense. It says, that does not end the matter, however, especially that Idumeans or Edomites, this is because the Jewish authorities kept up with the migration of their brethren, the Edomites. Edom or Esau was a twin brother of Jacob, and their descendants were kin to Jews. The Jews reckoned that many of the Edomites migrated west, even into North Africa and Rome. So he said most.
So you see how now this brother, he pulls out some very interesting sources, but you see how it lets you know that the Edomites actually went into Africa. We got evidence of that, them into North Africa, this upper area of Africa. So you can see that right here. This is evidence that Edom actually did go into Africa. Let me see if I got a wider picture. Ethiopia right here, just to show you where that is in Africa. I think it's good to see it on a map. At least I doubt Wikipedia would just give me a straight map. Let me just show you that. In fact, I don't know why I don't have Google Earth open. Just to show you where that is on a map. Let's zoom out. See that? There's a little area right here. So this is where they settled at. This is where we actually find their lineage here, right here in Ethiopia, right? And that's a perfect spot. It's not where it's more. Ethiopia is an area where a lot of people was made free from a lot of the colonization that was going on. The only place that mostly wasn't colonized or basically broken in pieces was Ethiopia. Ethiopia, all these places was touched, but Ethiopia barely was, for the sake of understanding. A little bit of the Congo was kind of left alone, but Ethiopia is going to be your main area that was barely destroyed. If you look at some of in 1844, basically the dividing of Africa that was going on. So Ethiopia stayed there for a long time. So it's interesting to see that group came down from Israel and they settled down here. Either they came from this way and settled down here, or they came from here, settled down here, or they even came from up here with the Hittite women and came and settled down here. Very easy to do that because I showed how small this area is. It's very easy to migrate, very, very easy to migrate because the area is smaller than the smallest state in America. Let's go down, and you can go from state to state pretty quickly. Obviously with a car, but walking, dedication, you can go pretty far. Let's go down a little bit. So now why do we only see a small portion of Edom today? Because, a lot of people, when they think of Edom, they say, oh, it's Rome and everything. Well, it is. For the sake of understanding, Edom is actually symbolic. We notice without a doubt, because if we go to Psalms 137, is a clear symbolic understanding. It's actually calling Edom even Babylon, for the sake of understanding, and Rome. It says also that's extremely important. We know that the male line is extremely rare. That's prophecy, whereas we see in multiple different prophecies, Amos 2:1, thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Moab, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he burned the bones of the king of Edom to lime. Now that's important to understand. What it's actually saying there is actually talking about destroying the males of Edom. That's what it's actually talking about there. It says, right, another one, it says, and I hated Esau and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. So he said that he did it already. He says that he laid Esau's heritage to waste. That's important to understand. But I have made Esau poor, because we can actually follow Esau's lineage up to about, I don't know, close to almost, I would say about 500 AD. So we can follow his lineage for a little bit. I think some even go up to 1080, but then after that, it just disappears from history. But here it is. It says, I hated Esau, laid his mountain and his heritage waste for the dragons. Another one right here, Jeremiah 49:10. But I have made Esau bore. I have uncovered his secret parts. He shall not be able to hide himself. Now, note what it says here. His seed is spoiled. His seed is spoiled, and his brothers. Note what it's saying here. His brothers, his seed. See, and remember, the male has the seed. The male has the seed because I'm going to show you that it actually shows that the women survive. His seed is spoiled, and his brothers and his neighbors. He is not. He is not. You see how it says he is not? That means the male lines are going to be very low. As it says, leave your fatherless children. I will preserve them alive. Let your widows trust in me. You see what he just said there to Esau? He said that his children will survive and the women will survive. Let's go down a little bit more. You can see right here, here's that one I was talking about, Psalms 137. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who are to be destroyed. You see, I was comparing Edom and Babylon. We know that this is actually Rome. It says, O daughter of Babylon, who are to be destroyed. Happy shall he be that rewards you as you have served us. Happy shall he be that dashes your little ones against the stones. That's a very angry statement, but that didn't change. As we see, even in the New Testament, it still talks on that. Romans 9:13, as it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. Now, that doesn't mean there's no spiritual Esau. For the sake of understanding, that's very important. And there can also be a physical Esau by the line of the woman. Now, obviously, that's not a biblical concept, but someone can judge themselves by putting that understanding on themselves for the sake of understanding, because the Lord does judge by measure. So it's some very heavy stuff when you actually consider it. I'm gonna go down a little bit. So now let's see what I want to show you now. I want to show you what geneticists see. You're never, this type of information that you're seeing here, you're never going to usually see this type of information with geneticists when they go over these things. Let's see if this thing would actually open up on me. You see these different types. We're going to be looking at these 3 different types. There's a normal mode. This is a normal mode right here. This is more, you're not going to get as detailed with the normal mode. You're not going to get as detailed as it actually supposed to be. There's also right here the unrooted. This is what we want to look at. We want to look at the unrooted mode. We can also look at the circular mode. The circular mode, we can look at that one, but the unrooted mode is actually what we want to look at. That's going to show us the 3 splits. So these are 3 different modes that geneticists actually know when they look at these things for the sake of understanding. So these are different types of ways to present a haplogroup. So I'm gonna go down a little bit. So everything that you're gonna see here, everything that you're going to see right now are from a real source. These are from real sources. As you can look at these things yourself, this is what a real geneticist looks at when he sees a split. I want you to see this first. I'm going to let this load in. All right. So take a look at this. These are haplogroups. Now, if you're not familiar with haplogroups, let me actually first go to a haplogroup list, so we can look at the haplogroups before we proceed from that. I got a clear one right here. You see on the side right here. Now, all you have to do is remember this. On Y haplogroups is A to S. Now, it's a weird thing that happens between T and S. It's actually A to T, but T is actually, I don't know why I put it right here, but in a sense, you can just understand it as A to T. There's 20 letters. Before there were 17, but now there's 20. There's 20 of haplogroups. So all you have to remember is A to basically T or S for the sake of understanding. Let's go back over here. Now as you know that, you know what the geneticists look at when they look at these things. You know they got different designs. Now you know what these different charts are. Now let's look at one of their charts. This is called a unrooted chart, right? Some people call it a star graph. But what it is actually a unrooted chart. Now this one's going to be your mitochondria DNA, which is your female line. This is going to be your haplogroup of your Y chromosome. Now take a look at the split here. I'm going to have a clearer picture to point out the split. There's actually 3 splits here. This is one split going this way. This is another split. Now this C right here may be connected to B and A. for the sake of understanding. This C may be connected to B and A. For the sake of understanding, I'm just going to say for now that C is actually connected to B and A because not a lot of people actually know what it actually is. I don't know what it is. No one really knows what actually it is. They don't know if it's actually, they don't know if C is connected to D and E or if it's connected to B and A. So I'm just going to put it like that for the sake of understanding. It actually splits off from these right here. A and B and C are going to be connected. And then you're going to have a different branch. As you can see right here, there's going to be another branch because there's actually a middle branch. This is a middle branch. This is the outer branch, and this is the outer branch. Two outer branches and one in the middle. You see what's going on there? Two outer branches and one in the middle. And you're going to see, we're going to show you a clear picture for these things. This is actually what geneticists see. You can see right here. There's your C right here. You can see how it's connected with B and A right there at the bottom right there. That's actually going to be your middle point right there. And it's going to split. And this is going to be your lines of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So this is going to be right in the middle. That's Ham. This is Shem. And this is Japheth. And we're going to look at that first before we get to this. Now, if you go to, let me go to Wikipedia. Let me just close this because it's not opening here. Let's go to A1 Haplogroup. Let me just show you something here. I want to show you something for clarity, as I think it's important to have clarity to these things. You see this thing? Now, if you ever look up haplogroups, you'll sometimes see it like this. Let me give you understanding for the sake of understanding on this thing. The split is actually in the middle. Don't look, if you ever go to these things, don't look at it like going down like this. That's not actually how it works. It actually splits, and there's going to be three different branches from BT, from CT, and from CF. These three right here split to three different ones. BT gives you A and B, which goes this way. Do not count this one. This is A00. Don't let this one confuse you. And I'm going to show you that they know A00. They name it A00, but it's not actually going to be an A lineage. It's important to understand that. A00 and A0, these two are actually going to be separate for the sake of understanding. But they actually going to split from BT. And if you want to see a little more on that, I got a video on the out of Africa, because this concept is actually the out of Africa concept, which is false. You can see this BT right here. They're actually trying to have A descend into BT. But if you've seen that video, you've seen that I've shown you that A does not descend into BT, but BT actually descends into, as you see at the bottom, they even put it there at the bottom, right there, A and B. BT actually brings forth A and B. A doesn't descend into BT. That's important to understand, because BT is actually going to be the split right here. And here's the clarity. Here's the clarity of the split. So there's three splits, and I'm going to show you on different charts that we can find these splits at BT. I mean at CT, for the sake of understanding. So at BT, you're going to get A and B. That's going to go, and it's going to split. These are going to be your Hamites, right? Don't be confused. A00 is Shem only, for the sake of understanding. This is actually going to be your split in the time of Noah. There's going to be a split BT, and it's going to bring your BT AB lineages. Shem is going to be your DE, and then Japhetic is going to be your CF. See right here? It's going to bring all of these. And notice, this is important to understand. This is how we know that these are going to be, remember, Nathaniel said that I and J is Japhetic. That's what Nathaniel said. Dr. Nathan Nathaniel said I and J is Japhetic. Do you know what? If I and J is Japhetic, then GHIJK, which brings forth IJK and IJK and IJ and K, these are all Japhetic because they're all underneath CF. So that's very important to understand that they're connected. That's how we can just put that into understanding that the J lineage cannot, and I repeat, cannot be of Shem, for the sake of understanding. This is actually where the split is. Let's go, because remember how I showed you? Even all geneticists agree. They all agree in this split. I'm going to show you a clearer one on this star map over here. Before I go to those, here is a star map with the split right here. See the arrows right here giving the clarity. So it's going to be a split here. There's going to be a split here, and there's going to be a split here. So you can see what's going on there just for the clarity on that. And then you're going to have your Hamites, your Shemites, and C may be a Hamite. It may be a Hamite for the sake of understanding. And then you have your Japhetics right here. You're going to have your Japhetic right here. So you can see that's a 3 split. And they know it. The people know it. They even mention themselves. I'm going to show you where they quoted themselves. They know about the 3 split. This is just talking about the out of Africa thingy. Let me go over a little bit. I'm going to show you where they quoted themselves. where they say about the 3 splits. In fact, I think it was right here. It says, now this is a very interesting, the geneticist on this page, he basically said this. It's true that the 3 major haplogroups have been long recognized by mainstream science. That means that they know that there are 3 splits in the lines of the people. That's Ham, Shem, and Japheth. That's evidence of the Bible. Understand? That's evidence. That's complete evidence of the Bible. If we find something that actually points, and we can see it in the women too. This is mitochondrial DNA, even 3 splits in the woman's line. So you can see where the splits are. Now these arrows I didn't do. This person did it themselves to show that those 3 splits and everything. You can see right there. And what sometimes they try to say that, oh, you can't go this way and try to fool anybody and think that we don't know the difference between charts, because this right here is actually a unrooted chart. This is actually going to be, this one right here is going to be basically the what's the word I'm looking for? The normal chart. This is going to be your normal chart, and the other one's going to be your unrooted. Let me zoom out. I don't know why I zoomed in like that. All right, reset that. Go down a little bit. So that's where the split is right there for clarity. Now you see your D and your E. They know that D and E actually began together. D and E, you can see right here. Get a little more clear on this image, just so you can see here. I'm gonna zoom in. In fact, this is not what I want to see. It's a different one I want to show you, because now I'm going to show you who is connected to, who D is actually connected to. So this is going to be a very interesting little story here that we're going to go through. Let's go through it at the right pace, though. Let me make sure we go down so we don't skip anything. This part is going more detail into, let me click this. This is going more detail into the line of Abraham. If you can see here, we're going to look at E1. Now, I'm going to show you that E1B1 is found in the Levant, and I'm going to show you it with the actual biblical information. So here's Abraham. Remember this word. Remember this. E1B1. Just remember that. P2. E1B1, P2, or E1B1. Just remember E1B1. This is before E1B1A. And then E1B1A1, which actually breaks into 12. And remember, Esau is going to be his own lineage right there. And then you can see Abraham's going to bring forth Ishmael, which is another lineage. Now let's look at something. I want to show you something real fast. Go down a little bit. Let me go down a little bit right here. This is what I want to show you here. So this is going to talk about the Natufian, right? The Natufian are going to be E1B1. Right? They're going to have E1B1A1 and E1B1B in them and whatnot. You can see right here, E1B1B right here. And then going down to, these are actually going to be the branch in the Natufian. These are going to be the people that are actually in the Natufian. These are going to be Abraham's family. And I'm going to show you scripture that actually verifies their location and where they were. So you see E1B1 right there brings down all the way over here. Now let's look at the evidence in the scripture on where this is actually found. So now first let's understand, during the time of the flood, they all landed in Mount Ararat, somewhere around Turkey. And then they went to an area where Babel is. Now the exact location is not 100% known, but this is a good idea of where it could have been. Is obviously would be in between the Euphrates and the Tigris, for the sake of understanding. They would be in what is called Sumer, or the Fertile Crescent, an area where it was very fertile ground to build and have a large population. Now, it's important to know that D and E split here. They split from Babel. Some went down here, and then D went up here. That's important to understand. From that area, they split. Let's go and look at something. Now, let's look at some history. Now, I'm going to show you, first, some routes. I'm going to show you how Abraham moved. And I'm going to show you what a Natufian is. All right, I'm going to pause this real fast. Let's go down a little bit. Let me show you what they found in Natufian DNA. What they found E1B1 or E1B1. Yeah. So this is what they found in Natufian DNA. You see what you're seeing here? Now, guess what? Now, this area right here is very important, right? This is actually where they find the DNA in Israel, right? This is going to be in Israel. This is the Natufian DNA, right? E1B1 in Israel. So they actually find them up here. Remember, this is E1B1, which they said was always in Africa. This is the African, so-called African DNA. So you can see right here at the river right here, which is the Euphrates, we're going to see who goes up here. Let's see what the scripture says, because that seems kind of high, doesn't it? But it's not. So remember, that's what we're looking at right here by the Euphrates, right? So we're going to get to Genesis, and we're going to see the migration first of Abraham, because remember, Abraham was called from Ur, and then he called them over here, and then they stayed in these areas. That's where they stayed, in these areas. So let's first see Abraham's line. So we got creation, we got the flood, we got the Tower of Babel, and then from there, the split, and then we got Abraham go from Ur, and you see where he's at, Haran. Let's go and look here. You can see this area right here, right? It's very interesting. I'm gonna close some of these so don't get too confused over here. All right, so you see Abraham moved from this area to this area. And now he's going downward. He goes and settled on these areas. Now, this video doesn't go into great detail on Isaac, so I'm going to show you. It's actually, few people actually know the movements of Isaac, but let me show you that we actually can find out the movements of Isaac based on the Strong's Concordance. So this is the movement right here of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They actually went to the same locations pretty much. Let me actually show you here. So Abraham took his wife and like his brothers, he left, right? He left from Haran, right, to Canaan, the area of Canaan, which is actually where Israel is, right? So right here, he came out of the area of Ur, right? See this red mount, I mean this red line right here. This is going to be Abraham's line. Abraham went over here along the Euphrates, went to Haran, right? And then he went to this area over here, Canaan. Then what happened? Then you got Isaac. No Isaac. Now, the reason why I did this short, because not a lot of people actually know Isaac, where Isaac went. Isaac actually went to the same place. He went to this place right here. And I'm going to show you how we know that he went to this place in Mesopotamia. And Jacob too. Jacob went up here as well. Notice this area is constantly being touched on. Remember, this is where the Euphrates is, right? Right a little above where the Euphrates is, right there. Let's go right here. So obviously, these are going to be the bodies of or evidence of the bodies of the peoples that they found in the Natufians. Let's go down a little bit. So let's read a little bit on this. It says, I will make you swear. This is what Abraham said. Remember, he wanted Isaac to not get a woman in Canaan, right? He says, you shall not take a wife for my son of the daughters of Canaan, right? Who among I dwell. That means he's in Canaan right now when he's giving that message, right? And then notice what it says right here. But you shall go to my country and my kindred and take a wife to, see what he's saying? My country. Go to my country and to my kindred and take a wife to my son Isaac. And the servant took 10 camels and he went up and look where he went. Mesopotamia, the city of Nahor. Now, a lot of people will say, where is the city of Nahor? What does he mean there? We just got to look at the Strong's Concordance. Nahor, if we just look up his name, we actually can see that he's actually Abraham's. It's actually, first I'm going to show you the Strong's right here. Where it talks about right here, it's a place called Aram, for the sake of understanding, or Aram, for the sake of understanding. And this is actually going to be the area where he's going to go. It's actually an area in between two rivers. It's an area between two rivers. Well, that's Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is in between two rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris, right in the district of Syria. So you can see Syria right here. Isaac came from here and went up over here to get Rebekah in Syria. And remember what it say about Rebekah. It says, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, his wife, the daughter of Bethuel, but what's that? Bethuel, the Syrian, right? You see what he's saying there? He's a Syrian, right? And notice that word right there, Padan Aram. I don't know how he completely pronounced that, but that's also talked about on here. It's also talked about being that same location, that same area. And it says the sister of Laban, the Syrian, right? So this is going to be in the area of Syria, where you see Syria right here. Let's go down a little bit. 1 second. Let me see. All right. All right. So look what it says right there. You see that name right there? It says, arise and go to this area, right? We just looked at that. That's going to be in that area. So you can see Isaac called Jacob, told him to go to the same place, right? He said not to take the daughters of Canaan, but he said to flee them. Remember, even Rebecca told Jacob to flee to where? Haran, right? So they're going to the same place. They're all going to the same area. And that's where we find the evidence of the Natufians. And remember, Abraham said his family's over here. He says families in these areas. So obviously, if his family's in these areas, guess where also they will come in? To Canaan. They'll come also in the area of Canaan, for the sake of understanding. And a lot of them will settle there. And that's where we find evidence of the Natufian DNA in those areas. So you can see right here. Now, this one, this strong definition, I had to cross out that it said the place where Rachel died. Rachel didn't die in Haran. Rachel died in the land of Canaan, for the sake of understanding. That's not a right definition, as we know that from Genesis 38:7. So, but I wanted to show you this, that these are the same words. These are actually going to be the same locations, that they actually went to the same location. Here's another one. Jacob went basically from Canaan, right? Beersheba, and went towards Haran, right? And then he went to where it says right here, Laban, the son of Nahor, right? And notice, remember, Isaac went to the city of Nahor, right? The same city that's in the place of Haran. That's very important to understand. So Isaac, Jacob, and Abraham went to the same places. They went to the same places. Obviously, it's a sign, because as you can see here, the Natufian DNA that has E1B1 is found in these areas, as you can see here. Very interesting, just to show you that the E lineage is actually a Middle Eastern lineage. Remember how I showed you that they said that? They said that the E lineage is actually a Middle Eastern lineage. Very important to know that. Now let's keep going. Let's keep going, because we can actually see that it all matches even with the biblical account. We got the three. Remember, we got all the things that we need for us to find the evidence of these things. Now we just need to see if geneticists actually find evidence of the Bible within the genetic information. Do they find 12 tribes? Do they find that they have 4 mothers, right? Do they have these things in the original people? Do we see these things? I'm going to show you that we do. So this is going to be from Noah, the split. You're going to see Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or Shem, Japheth, and Ham right there. And you're going to have different lineages, different branches. And this is what you see in the haplogroup. Now, if this looks too complex, then haplogroups may be complex. But if you are willing and paying attention, you're going to get the great, if you haven't understood these things before, you're going to understand these things now. You're going to understand these things, and it's the best way to understand them in its clearest form, right? So you can see these things. These are going to be your lines of Shem, right? You're going to trace all the way down until you get to Abraham, which is actually going to be right here. So you can see Abraham, like how it twists like that. So Abraham, and then remember, after Abraham, he has Ishmael, right? He also has another daughter. Another woman who has other sons. These actually merge with Ishmael. These are going to all be E1. These are going to be E1B for the sake of understanding. These are going to E1B1B or E1B1B for the sake of understanding. These actually merged together. These became one. These ones over here. Now, some of their women actually became one with Israel, like the ones of right here, the median. These ones actually going to become, the women are going to become one with Israel. So these ones actually become basically given to Ishmael and Israel for the sake of understanding. But you're going to still have Ishmael reigning, and you're going to have Isaac reigning in his line, Jacob, and the 12. So you see that's going to be 4 mothers, and we're going to have 12 tribes. And we're going to look at those and the information there. So you can see each one has their own, right? Let's go and look at these things. And it's also important to know why that happened. Why did Jacob get stuck in that situation? He got a crazy situation that he was put in. All right. Let's go down a little bit. We just talked about those charts, right? We know about the 3 haplogroups that all scientists recognize, right? You got to know the split. Make sure you know where it splits, or else someone's going to try to split it at the wrong place, and then that's when error happens. So you can see right here, just talking about those 3 lineages, the 3 lines and everything. Go down a little bit. I'm going to go down a little more. We already talked about this one. Here's a little more clear with those arrows showing you where it splits and everything. So you can see this is going to be the split from BT to CT. And that's where you're going to, from BT, you're going to get B and A, right? Always remember, A00, that's not going to be found in the A and B lineage. They just call it A00, but it's only found in the ones who have E. You're going to have as CT, you're going to split from DE and DE, right? You're going to have two different, and we're going to look at DE. We're going to look at DE and look at who these people are. So CF, these are going to be Japhetic lines. Let's go down a little more. Now remember how I showed you the different types of graphs? This one is going to be your normal graph. This is not going to be your rooted or a circular. I'm going to show you a circular afterwards, but first this is going to be your normal graph, right? Here's the split. We can even show the split on the normal graph. The only thing about the normal graph, we'll go up over here a little bit, show you something. These are the three graphs we're looking at. There's a circular graph. We're going to look at that one too. Remember I showed you the unrooted? We've seen the three splits from the unrooted. That's why they have a clear three splits, because they know it. And then right here is your normal graph. Now the thing about your normal graph, you're going to have a bar that's too high. Right here, that bar is going to have a little line. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a line that goes out this way because it's trying to connect it to A00, which it doesn't connect. A00 doesn't descend into anyone. A00 doesn't, you never, from an A00 lineage, you can't get a A1A lineage, or you can't get an R lineage or any other lineage. A00 produces A00. It's actually a very interesting topic. We'll talk about it on here as well. Let's go right here. That's circle right here. You see this right here? From CT, you see that where I put this line right here? This is the clear split of 3 lines. This is what they agreed to. From CT, you get DE and then E and D lineages. And from CT, you get BA or BT, which actually you see how they loop it like this because they're trying to connect it with A00. It doesn't actually loop like that, and they know it. It doesn't actually loop like that, but it actually goes downward. As you see from here, it actually goes down. You get B lineage, and you'll actually get A as well from CT. From CT, you'll actually get A and B. As I talked about that before, we know that no haplogroup of index A actually descends into CT, right? Just for clarity of the live, let me just show you that, just for the sake of understanding, so you know that all the information that you're seeing is genetically correct, as that is the most important thing, to double check information, as there is no shame in truth, as it is always correction to perfection and to what is expected comes into life. Let's go down and look at something. I want to show you something on what they say themselves, right? This is going to be the information that you can find on the video that we did out of Africa, basically debunking it, because the out of Africa theory is actually a extremely false theory that even geneticists know is not true. But let me show you what they say about index A. Those that have index A, because you got to be careful when looking at these things. We'll turn this down a little bit and go to that. I want to show you this one because I think this is very interesting. I want to go to a direct one. Okay, assume it's a groups. Fork, listen to that. That one is, okay, here it is. Watch what it says right here. Remember, this is a PDF. It says, it is obvious that haplogroup BT, you see right here? Now on this thing, BT's not here because obviously they would try to put it somewhere around here for the sake of understanding, or here, anywhere where they would want to put it. Most likely here for the sake of understanding, because it goes CT and then we have BT for the sake of understanding, and it would have B and you have A for the sake of understanding. Because remember, CT and BT is very close related. Watch what it says right here. It says, it is obvious that haplogroup BT does not descend from African haplogroups having index A, right? Since all of, now that's the reason why that's important to understand, because if you ever see a design like this, if you ever see a design like this, this is what they're saying. This is what they're saying right here. This is a real PDF. It's saying that BT does not descend from African haplogroups having index A. So that means this is false. You see where it's showing you A1A descending into BT? That's false. That's a false design. Rather, BT is actually bringing forth A. That's important to understand. But this is actually twisted data, and they know it. to fit out of Africa ideas for the sake of understanding. And that's a quote that they actually say themselves on that PDF. It says, apparently they were too much focusing at bending the data to fit out of Africa. You see right there? So they know index A doesn't go into sub-haplogroup BT for the sake of understanding, just for clarity. Also, we can find different ages for BT for the sake of understanding. But let's go over a little bit. Not too far. Let's go back right here. So you see that split right there? So from CT, you actually would get A and B. You actually go and you'll get your A and B lineages. Be careful with this A0 right here. That's actually going to be A0. That's going to be not connected. As you can see, it shoots straight down. It's not connected to anyone else. Not connected to anyone else. It's the only haplogroup that we actually see like that. A0, A00 for the sake of understanding. This actually AB, the split from A and B for the sake of understanding, actually are going to be connected going from BT. And then you're going to have another lineage, CF. CF is going to have your Japhetic lines. This is a normal branch. This one I don't like too much because you can see it's a little more confusing, but it's not as hard to understand. But that's the split right there for the three lines. You can get 3 distinct lineages. Let's go over here. Here's the circle design. This is going to be your circle design. Now this one, it may seem a little hard at first, but once you understand that this is actually going to A00, which is not connected to none of these, then all you have to do is understand where does it split. And it splits right here. In fact, here they put a side note right here. Very interesting. And I just put the arrows here so you can see where the split is. From CT is going to split to CF. And then BT is going to give your B and your A lineages. From BT is going to descend into your B and your A lineages. CT actually gives you DE, and DE is going to give you E and D. You see what's going on there? E is what we're going to look at. That's going to be Israel. Now we got to find out who's this other people. I'm going to show you. Right here is going to be your Japhetic lines. So Japhetic lines, all your branches are Japhetics, right? That's what you see right here on the outside right here. And you see a little bit on the outside right here, your A and B right here. And then right in the middle, if you see this this is actually where it's split. You see this right here? You're going to have a split that's going to go right here, and it's going to give your B and your A lines. Right here is the split. It's going to give your B and your A lines. Remember how I said dodge the hijack, A00. You see how it's trying to connect to the A00 is not connected for the sake of understanding. That's not a true design. As we know, BT does not actually descend from anyone that has index A. You can also see that this is going to be right here. This is the split. This is going to be your B and your A. Right here is going to be your D, right? This is going to be your split also, your D and your E, right there. So you see that split. So right here is 3 splits, 1 split, 2 splits, 3 splits to your Japhetic lines. So this one, C, you can see C is all over the place. You see now is over here on this side. We don't know it's Japhetic. We don't know it's Hamitic. We don't know for the sake of understanding. C is something else. But you can see right here, these are going to be your areas of the split. So you have one here. These are totally different. See how these are not touching? E is not touching B, right? This is going to be your B line. This is going to be your D. There's a split here, separation, and they know it. It's a big separation. So these are going to be separated, and they're going to be 3 lineages. So that's your circle. This is how you now you just understand how to understand all 3 of these charts, right? If you ever see any of these type of charts, if you pay attention to a little bit of this, you can actually have the understanding to these things, these 3 different types of charts, the circular mode, the unrooted mode, and the normal mode. So I like the unrooted because you're going to get the clearest design, actually what it's supposed to be. You're going to actually get the clearest design, what it actually is supposed to be. And this is actually what geneticists agree with. This is from a PDF. You can see the PDF yourself as well. You can see the PDF and where the splits actually are. You can see right there. Go over a little bit. Now what we want to do, go over here. We already talked about these things. Now let's talk about the evidence of the split of D and E. Now you see right here, you're going to see your CF. That's going to be a different lineage. CF is going to bring your Japhetic lines. And then there's another lineage, which is DE, right? And there's going to be another lineage, which is B and A. There's a different lineage. But now let's look at D and E. So you see D actually goes one type of way. There's going to be a different type of people, but the same. They're actually connected in the beginning. Their haplogroups were the same. They were all DE, but they split. So you're going to have your E and you're going to have your D lineages. Now, who they are, that's a great question. Who is D? That is a great question. Maybe we'll do a direct study on that, on who is D. I don't know exactly who D is, but I actually can show you who D is found in. I can't tell you who they are biblically, but I can tell you who they are today for the sake of understanding. Let's actually look at some things real fast.
Hello, everybody. It's Shabar here. Is it just me who notices the striking similarities between Japanese and African languages? And before I begin, I just want to make something clear. Many people come to my videos and assume that I'm one of those annoying, bigoted, Afrocentric people trying to preach pseudo-history and basically be a culture vulture. And as annoying and frustrating it is when people come here with those assumptions, I don't really blame them because YouTube is so polluted by people like that. The only thing it does is make people like me who actually back up my sources with references and evidence less credible. So before we start, I'm just going to make one thing clear. I'm not trying to claim that Africans made it to...
I'm going to skip a little ahead.
Now let's get to the meat of this video. So one of the things I've noticed throughout my many years of researching African history, cultures, and kingdoms and languages, I noticed that they bear striking similarities to Japanese. One of the most obvious similarities is that nearly every Japanese word and every African word ends in a vowel. And by African, I'm referring more particularly to, but not specifically to, Niger-Congo languages. There were a few words in these languages that...
For the sake of understanding, Niger-Congo, Niger River, and the Congos, that's actually going to be where the Bantu people were. The Bantu expansion, everything, they're going to actually be lower in that area. Here's a... I'm gonna see if I can find a clear separation to show you an idea of that. Here's one. Right here. Okay, so you see this separation right here? You can see E1B1B up here. You're gonna see a lot of your E1B1B up here, and then you're gonna also see your E1B1A down here. These are gonna be your Bantu clades. Right, that's what he's talking about when he said from the Niger, which is going to be a river over here, the Niger River, and you're also going to have your Cameroon and Congo, things like that down in these areas. You can see right here. There's actually the Bantu expansion. These are actually one people. These are actually one people. This is not multiple different people. They may have different practices because of all the rebellion that had happened, but they're actually going to be the same people, same haplogroup group. For the sake of understanding, they call it the Bantu expansion because at first it was just here, right, in Guinea, and then they actually expanded all the way down to over here, and you can see some even in these areas. It's actually called the Bantu expansion. Sometimes you can see these B and A. These are actually real Hamites. These are the real Hamites, and remember it said they actually pushed them out. The Israelites that were in these areas were pushing them out, and the Ishmaelites controlled the top area. The Ishmaelites actually control the top area to this day. A lot of them are actually mixed with J. You can see a lot of J lineages with the E1B1B. That's why you actually see a lot of E1B1B a lot of times up in these areas. Sometimes a lot of them mix with the real Ishmaelites. So you see a lot of E1B1B mixed in with them. Right. So you got your certain lineages in these areas, and then it's just going to be your Turkish lines. So let's keep going because I want you to see what I want you to understand here is that. Hold on. All right, just hearing how it sounds. So I want you to understand here these two groups. So what he's actually talking about is this group down here. He's actually talking about this group at the bottom right here. He's actually saying that the D lineages is highly related to these ones.
Do not end in vowels, almost always end with the letter N.
So I'm not going to show this, but this is a very interesting video to see, and it is going to be right underneath this picture right here, as you can see there. But I'm going to show a little highlight on there. As you can see, is right in between the circle graph and a normal graph. So it's going to be right here. But let me show you a little bit on there. So he just basically, what he does is show that a lot of the Japanese words and the words of the Bantu, which actually means people, actually are related, highly related.
And the modern day Japanese version of Edo is now known as Tokyo. What's even more striking is that in the year 1457, the city of Edo was built in Japan, just 13 years prior to the city being renamed to Edo in the Benin Empire. So for several centuries, two kingdoms that were half the world away from each other shared the same name for their capital cities. By the way, the friend that I mentioned previously, I'll leave a link to his YouTube channel in the description. I couldn't help but notice that even his name sounds Japanese. Mali, known as Mogadishu. Here's a list of some Yoruba words that I have compared side by side next to Japanese words.
And this group right here, if I recall, Yoruba. Let's look this up. Let me show you something real fast. If I have them here, make sure I spell it the way it's supposed to be spelled, though. Yoruba. Just seeing here. I want to see if I have that here so you can see their genetic information, so I can show you that these are the same ones. This is going over some of the people. Let's see. His genetic studies have shown that the Yoruba to cluster most closely with West African peoples, right? It just says right there, Yoruba people are largely found within the E1B1A, right? E1B1A1. I just want to show you that for the sake of clarity, that's what we're talking about. That same group that's E1B1 that's down here. That's what we see. That's a group that we see right here, E1B1A. Different than E1B1B, which are up here, right? E1B1B up here, E1B1A down here. Very important.
I also came across this list of Igbo words.
Most people are familiar with Igbo, right? Igbo, Hebo, all those things. You can see how similar they are.
Lastly, guys, before I get to my last topic, again, I'm going to reiterate again.
Yep, that's right. This group, these different types of groups, I'm going to show you a few of their names. All these are actually related to the Japanese, right? A lot of these people are actually related to the Japanese, the original Japanese. And I'm going to show you what the original Japanese looked like before the mixing. There's a lot of mixing that the Japanese did for the skin color to change and everything. But they originally were a darker skin race. If you look at the original Japanese, they were actually originally a darker skin race. And actually, many people actually started off darker skin, and a lot of us became lighter. And the reason why a lot of us became lighter, a lot of people became lighter, you can see right here, this little group. The reason why they became lighter is because of the radiation. Few people know this, but radiation, the UV rays are higher. UV rays are higher in colder climates. UV rays are higher in colder climates. I'm sorry for that pause. So you see right here, these are UV rays. The darker the color, right? You're gonna have more stream and different things like that. You have higher UV rays in areas where you have colder climates. So in colder climates, you're gonna have some higher UV rays and whatnot. And that's what's going to change skin color sometimes. You're going to have that, and also obviously genetic things that also cause that as well, right? And that's important. That's important to know because the UV rays are going to sometimes change some things, as well as the possibility of mixing, and sometimes even inbreeding can cause different things. So again, let's look at some more. So you can see right here, if you know anything about these things, the Bantu and all those things and whatnot, the Yoruba and Igbo. This is a great video to go over. This person, he's actually showing how in linguistic language they're related. This is linguistic, right? The study of language. He's showing that in language and in tradition, naming of cities, different things like that, they're highly related. You can even look at some of their sculptures, some of their designs. You can see their original ones. They were highly similar, as you can see there.
Maybe it's just me, but their features are definitely extremely similar, and the overall art style is extremely similar.
So you can see some ideas there. I'm going to close this. Make sure they're still going. Yep. Isn't that something, family? I thought that was really something when I seen that. But let me show you a little more on that D lineage. Let's go here. And let's look at these. Let me see if this is the one I just pressed.
Hello, everybody.
Yep.
Notice it.
I'm going to click this one. All right. Now watch what this is really interesting. It gets deeper, but this one you can see right here, looking for the root of the Japanese. So this is an older video talking about the root of the Japanese and everything. And this is what they say. In fact, you can see what they say right here. It says, then how did the ancestors of the Japanese get to the basically Japanese islands from Africa? You see what it's saying there? It's saying that now obviously the out of Africa idea is false. They were actually over here and they split. It's very important to know that, right? It's actually letting us know that they came from these areas and they settled in these areas for the sake of understanding. I'm just gonna skip a little ahead. What you're seeing here is actually a mingled group, right? Showing you different genetic, right? The genetic sequences and everything, showing you who they mix with. They mix with Chinese, with Koreans. Those are more Japhetic, right? Your Korean, Chinese, they were more Japhetic. Japanese are different than Chinese. You can see these names right here. These names, we're going to look at these names, right? These names are going to be very important to look at. Yep. So as you see what it just said right there, it says it was proven that the Japanese are a mixture of many ethnicities, right? Let me go over here. Now I'm going to go down. In fact, right here, here's some deep historical information on them. Here's a look.
日本での DNA 比率、中国、朝鮮等と同じ人たち。
You see this portion right here is letting us know that percentage of them.
日本特有の人たち。
It's going to let us know the original are actually going to be related to this group right here.
この DNA が最も多いのは
So it's going to relate in these two
アンダマン
groups.
諸島人とアイヌ、
These are the original Japanese.
兄弟民族と言える。彼らは一見似てないが、アンダマン諸島人にヒゲを描くとそっくり。ヒゲがない者同士を比べると、やはりそっくり。
You see how similar they are?
アイヌはアンダマンと同じネグリトの面影がある。ヒゲのないアイヌを
Don't need the sound. You can see they're very similar. These are very similar people, and they were originally a darker skinned people. And in fact, in Japan, a lot of places like Japan, Brazil, with the darker skin race being there and the lighter skin race being there, a lot of times in the beauty magazines or beauty, or even just trying to demonstrate what is the image that the nation wants to go for, they would usually go for a whiter image. So it's actually very important to understand, because of a lot of the slave trades, a lot of people of darker skin descent were seen as lesser beings. In fact, there was a lot of false science that was basically saying they were only 2 out of 5% human. That's what they were actually trying to say, that a lot of people that were actually darker skin were actually not human, which is actually completely false, because we know that humans share almost 99% of their genetics very similar to each other, for the sake of understanding. And what we're looking at is the tiny details that makes you different, for the sake of understanding. Let's go down a little bit more on that. So this one gets really deep. I think this is the one that gets really, really deep onto this information. Yep. This might be it. Maybe. Let me just see. I want to go to a certain timestamp, 1441. I want to see if this is it, because I want to show you something on here. 1441.
We have the Juda without the ball, used to serve. Coming from these Caucasian smiles, the Israelites were white, the Israelites were European. Therefore, any Jew you see within America that's black, they have to be mixed with Negroes. But based off scripture and based off historical research, we know that the Israelites were Negroes and their descendants were Negroes and are the Negroes. Just a quick note. But
I'm gonna go Actually, not this one. Let me see. Where is it? Right here. There's just a little more on it, but I'm looking for something. I'm going to show you something that's a little more. This is just old photography of them, the original Japanese. You can see a little bit on them and everything. So you can see them. So they're their own branch, yet they are going to be connected. At the end of it, when you connect D and E has a connection down the line. So you can see right there, D and E actually meets together. So they actually split their Shemites. They're actually going to be Shemites. Right here, here's the deep information. This is going to be the deep information to this. Go down a little bit. All right, so Haplogroup D. This is gonna be 15 minutes of some deep information that I think is important, but I'm gonna show a portion of it.
When you read the European philosophers, what did they say? They often said that Africa had two great civilizations, Egypt in the north and Asia in the south. The white man said this. So they often, in ancient times, Asia was considered a part of Africa or Africa's second civilization. They said that you go to Asia and it's nothing but a carbon copy of Africa because it was settled by the Africans.
A lot of people don't know that there are pyramids all over Asia, and there are pyramids in China. In Japan, they have an underwater pyramid that a lot of people don't know about. And you can go there now, and that's one of those ancient mysteries. But again, pyramids are all over the planet.
So in Asia today, you have pockets of black people. You have the Mani. You have in southern Thailand. You have a related group in northern Malaysia, sometimes called Sakai, S-E-K-A-I. You have the Andaman Islanders, and there are at least two groups. One group is called the Onge, O-N-G-E, or O-N-J-E. I think it's O-N-G-E. And another is called the Jawara, J-A-R-A-W-A. And then you have black populations in the Philippines, sometimes called Negritos or Eta, or I think we should call them Acta, which just means the people. You have a tradition of a similar group in Taiwan. These are the diminutive Africoids. These are the small blacks, similar in many ways to the Twa or so-called Pygmies in Central Africa. These are very, very ancient people who left Africa perhaps 60, 70, maybe 100,000 years ago and became isolated.
The Padang people, that's a group of people in Asia, and the women have these rings that they wear on their necks that's identical to an African tribe of women in East Africa who wear the same type of rings on their necks. So this just shows that the African-Asian connection is still there. They still carry on some of the African cultures and traditions in certain parts of Asia.
I once had a professor of mine working on my doctorate tell me that she went to Japan and they went into the mountains of Japan. Now, this isn't a conscious woman by most definitions, but she couldn't wait to come back and tell me this. She said, Umar, I was in Japan. We went up into the spiritual temples of Japan, and we sat down in one of the temples waiting for the priest to come out and teach us a little bit about what they believe and what they stand for. She said, Umar, they walked out of the temples and their skin was just as black as ours. They had gray afros because they were elders. Now, she said the phenotype looked like the modern Asian, but she said the skin was black and they had gray afros, hair standing up on top like Don King. And she said it totally overcame me. They sat down and they began to talk. And she said, I couldn't believe these were black men. They were Japanese, but they were black men.
When I went over to Indonesia, I went there at night and I would see billboards of very light-skinned Asian Indonesian people. And then when I went to my hotel, I would go and watch these movies and I would see these very, again, light-skinned, pale-skinned Indonesian Asian people. But the next day when I went out into the streets of Indonesia, everybody was either my color or darker. I didn't see one person who looked like these people that were on the billboards and on television. So they would pick and choose and get the whitest looking Asian people to promote in the media over there.
And when I walked around Indonesia, I saw people like jet black, dark. I ran into a couple of people with afros. I saw one Asian brother, full-blooded Asian guy with an afro, and I had to stop him. I said, brother, where are you from? And the brother was like, I'm from here, right here in Indonesia. So that African presence, that African phenotype is still throughout Asia to this day. Look at the Buddha's hair.
So this is a very, very interesting, informative video. I have this note in the description if you want to see more on that. Here is right underneath or right above where you see this little map of D that you see right here is actually showing D moving around right there. So they say it came out of Africa. Obviously, it actually came from the Middle East. That's where it split and actually went over here, settled in these areas. You see it in, you can find it in the area of India. You can find it in the area right here in the Japanese. That's where you can find the D lineage. It's all over. It's all over that area. So you can see that's going to be right here. So where you see this thing, the split of D and E, right? You're going to see a split of D and E, and right underneath that it says, therefore D is the line of Shem. If you want to see that video, it's a longer video. You can see 15 minutes, and it goes deep into the history of all these things, and it talks about how indeed the original people that were actually in Japan and a lot of places like Indonesia and things like that were actually going to be of the people of the D lineage that split from the E lineage. So it's very interesting information on these things. Close that. Actually, okay. Let's go down a little bit. So we just talked about, I'm gonna click this. We just talked about how D and E are highly related. So D and E lineages are highly related. They know it for a fact. All right, I'm just read a little bit here. Okay, so D branch near the D and E split talks about different places that it could have came from and everything. Just talks about some things here. Nothing too important that I want to show you from this. Is just talking about some things that I just showed you already. Go over here. You can see the movement there. Just talked about that. Here's the idea. This one may looks a little more confusing, but what you're actually seeing is the movement. This is more towards where you see Japan, right? It's going to be Japan, and they're gonna show us that they actually came. This so-called out of Africa idea. Actually, they came from the Middle East, but it's just letting you know how they actually settled in this area. You see the blue right there. The blue is what you want to follow. The blue settled here. You can see it in these islands right here. You can see some of the blue settle in there. You can also see it settle down here. You can see different names for these people, right? You can see them moving around and set on these different areas. So that's that D lineage, how it got over there, all the way to this area. Yet it broke off from the E lineage. Let's go over a little more. All right. So I'm going to skip these ones because this one is just about BT and CT, and just talking about how the understanding of those things of out of Africa has to be understood, that there's no millions and billions of years. That's important to understand. So I already talked about this. This is on a video where we talk about the out of Africa idea, and we show how that's not true. So you can see right here, this is another normal graph. Now this is a more detailed normal graph, but you can see CT right there. It splits right there. You're going to get your A and your B lineages right there. This is going to actually be your A and your B lineages, what it's going to. Your A and your B lineages. As you can see, it's not B on here, but it's going to be connected over here. So your CT would split and go into your A lineages. It would also split, and remember, who's it going to get? Your D lineage right there. These are Shem. You see this split right here? This is all these right here are to one split. All these over here are to one split. So A and B lineages are to one split, and then your D and E lineages are on one split. So you can see your D and E is going to get your D and your E lineages. Now E is going to be your E1B1. You can see right here your Ishmaelites, your E1B1B, and your Israelites, your E1B1A. So your E1B1B and your E1B1A will be your major groups of Africa, in the area of Africa that you see in those areas. Now, remember, if you haven't seen the E1B1B video, it's a very important video to see as to go over what is Africa and who named Africa Africa. The Ishmaelites, the ones that are actually in Arabia, actually took Libya and called it Africa. These are the real Africans, for the sake of understanding. You can see another split from CT, your Japhetic lines. So you get your Japhetic lines, that's over here. So let's go over a little more. Here's another one. Your split is right here. This is going to be your split from Noah. You can see you're going to get your 3 lineages, right? From this split, you're going to get your B and your A lineages, right? From that split, from your A and your B lineages from that split. You're also going to get a split, and you're going to get D and E right there. You see your split, you're going to get D and your E lineages from that split. And you also get your split from Japheth. Remember, Japheth also means to expand or increase, right? Japheth obviously is larger, as you can see there, has more. They expanded more. Think of the Scythians and things like that, upper north. They more ruled and dominated in many areas. So let's go over a little bit. Now let's talk about, do geneticists actually agree with the information that we actually see here? Because let's go over here a little real fast. Remember how I showed you, we know the split. If we know this is the split, if we know that this is the split of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, right? This is split of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and we can match the history with the people. Can we also find that geneticists agree that this is a sign of Jacob, right? Does this have any evidence showing that the M2, the E1, B1A, 1 have any signs of Jacob, M2, right? Yes, it does have. We see that the E lineage was in the Levant. We even have evidence that, let's go to right here. Now watch what it says on these things right here. So this is going to be important. It says, of the possible, now they're going to try to look at every haplogroup, every single haplogroup, and try to find a lineage that has 12 branches. They say this, of the possible 17 haplogroups, because at the time of this research, there was 17 haplogroups. Now there's 20. Now there's 20 haplogroups. But of the possible 17 haplogroups, 12 were observed in the complete data set with E1B1A model, not E1B1B, not any other lineage, not D, not R, not J, not K, not L, not none of them. Only one that we actually find where we have 12 branches are actually going to be an E1B1A. And for clarity to understand what it's saying here, I'm going to show you another one. So 12 were observed in the complete data set with haplogroup E1B1A model, right? Here's another one. This one just talks about a group where there's 4 different groups. And the reason why there's 4 groups, it says most of the individuals belong to one of the 4 sub-haplogroups. And it talks about those 4 sub-haplogroups. The reason why you have 4 sub-haplogroups is because there are 4 major branches. And this is very well because there are 4 mothers. The reason why you have 4 branches is because the mutation from the mother will actually cause those things. So you can see here's the 4 groups. This is one group. All this is one group right here. This is another group. This breaks off to a group right here. So this is another group. That's 2 groups. So 1 group, 2 groups. And then if you look closely, here's another group right there. This is another group, and there's another group. So there's like 4 main groups there to show that there's 4 mothers that were at play in bringing forth these groups. Let's go over a little more. Besides that, watch what it says here about the 12. It says, it just let us know 12 Y chromosomal sub-haplogroups were observed. You see how it says right there? It says that this line of E1B1, this is all from E1B1A, is letting us know that they had 12 sub-haplogroups observed in them. You can see in this one. So just to know that recombination is by the mother, that's why you have 4, right? Because we can see that's 4 mothers, right? There's 4 major groups that we see there, but there's going to be 12 branches. So 4 mothers, 12 branches, right? Let's look at that again on this one. It says, the comparison with data from Africa allowed placing the most likely origin of 12 out of 20 potential founders. You see what it's saying there? So the most likely origin out of 12 out of 20 potential founders. So it's very important, just for the sake of summary, that is letting us know that there are actually 12 branches from M2 that are actually going to be the origin of the tribes of Israel, for the sake of understanding. That's actually what it's let us know, that E1B1A is the only lineage that actually shows the 12 branches. That's the only one that actually shows that there are 12 branches that comes from these groups. You can see right there, very important. We can also talk about L0 and all that, but I'm gonna skip L0 and whatnot. So it's important to understand that now that we understand that, it's important to understand this, right? Someone else noticed this as well. This person actually goes through it. I'm gonna show you what he shows as well on these things. He actually finds this out as well, and I think it's interesting when he goes over it too. It's kind of hard.
Bantu speaking people. Okay, so Haplogroups. 12 were observed in the complete data set with Haplogroup E1B1A model. All right, so they give you the range. Now look, both overall and in every sub. So that's part of the introduction. Let's just get to the results of this, because the results, even though we didn't read much of all this, what was in this journal, all right, you know, we won't get to the results and get immediately making of the possible 7, so a complete data standard. Only 2 other are also shown in figure 2. Most of the individuals belong to one of 4 sub-haplogroups. So now you see what I'm saying?
This one goes over those things. This one's a little quieter, but if you want to see this one as well, right underneath here, got that information on there just to show that there's also others that's recognizing these things, and these things are so. Basically, here's basically what it would look like. What I did was go on Family Tree and open up a couple branches. So this is an actual screenshot from the site. Now, for the sake of understanding, this is a visual. This is a visual example. I don't know exactly what are those 12 origin groups. I don't know them by exact name, by the exact subclide group that they are, as that information I could not find on that note. But they do admit that there are 12 branches, and I was able to open up and get a type of understanding for those 12 branches that basically come from M2. So you can see right here, for the sake of understanding, you can see those 12 branches. This is for example. As you can see, opening up M2, you can get 12 branches, right? So you can see what's going on there for the sake of understanding. So I wanted to show you this because I think it's very interesting and very important to know that they actually mentioned that there are going to be, from this haplogroup of E, there's going to be 12 sub branches that are going to be the origin of all the tribes of Israel. So that's evidence of the Bible. That's actually evidence of the Bible itself. Very interesting to see those things. Now, it also talks about there's other branches and stuff like that. Where could we get other branches? There's actually a couple different mixes that we see in the Bible. For example, like I was talking about with Keturah, right? That's going to be a woman that actually had other children that Abraham sent to the east, right? It's actually mentioned that Israel slayed the males, and then they took in the females and different things like that, so we can get different branches that can come out from that. That can be definitely possible, right? We even got different things with Esau, right? But I already talked about how Esau is going to be your E1B1C and everything, and he married Canaanites and whatnot. And you can see right here, and this one right here, you can see another one. And Miriam and Aaron spoke against the woman that, remember, who Moses married, right? Moses also got with a Cushite, for the sake of understanding, who they say is Ethiopian, for the sake of understanding. So that's why we can have different branches, right? Because they all didn't always mix with Israel. It's important to understand Israel didn't always mix with Shemites. In fact, Israel mixed a lot with Hamite women. That's why when you look on the woman's line, the L lineages can actually represent Ham, or it can represent Shem, for the sake of it. That's why I say the female's line, the NT DNA, is a little more complex. It's a little more complex to understand because the information that's provided there actually is blending lineages. It's very important to understand that you're actually looking at Hamitic and Shemitic female lines in the L lineage. But that's nothing to be unheard of. Obviously, we see that early on with Joseph. We see that early on with obviously having Ephraim and Manasseh, having Moses, right? We see that very early on with Judah. Judah was mixing with the Canaanite women. Although this was a thing that was happening there. These were Hamites, for the sake of understanding. So you can see that's going to give us some other branches, different things like that. Just to show you that's something that's to take in the actual information of the scripture, that Israel was mixing with Hamites. They were mixing with Hamites. It is something that we know. That's why we look at the female line, we can see the evidence of it. We can see the evidence that the L lineages actually are going to be Shemites and Hamites, for the sake of understanding. Go down a little bit more. So right here, now this is really interesting because if Israel was dark, would any historian ever describe them as being dark skinned? Yes. For example, on an ancient map, we can know that Ethiopia was in this area. And if we look with one of the Roman historians named Tacitus, right? The Roman historian Tacitus in 500 and basically 55 AD, he wrote that many of his time believed that the Judeans, remember, this is 55 AD before Jerusalem fell. He's saying that many of his time believed that the Judeans were a race of Ethiopian origin. He basically said they were up from Ethiopia. He's saying that the Jews seemed like they were from Ethiopia, right? So keep in mind that in Tacitus' time, there was no country called Africa, right? This whole thing was actually called Ethiopia down here. Above was called Libya, Africa, where the people actually settled that area. Rome actually called a small portion of the area up there Africa. But they actually said that the Jews seemed more like they were of Ethiopian origin. So very important to understand of ancient maps, this whole area down here was actually Ethiopia. And so they start colonizing on these areas of the borders, and they start working their way in. So you can see on this map, the whole continent was called Ethiopia, just to get an idea there. It actually just means black. In other words, it's basically saying the Israelites had black faces, because that's actually what Ethiopia means. It means black face or burnt face. In other words, the Israelites were of Ethiopic black, was an Ethiopic black race, right? Very important to understand, though they went into Africa, they weren't native to Africa. Though they went into Africa, they weren't native to Africa. And this is how the information that we find is very crucial information. Go down a little bit. Very, very interesting video to see, deep information on these things. You can see here's some old maps. It's always good to get old maps because old maps are going to give you a lot of information that's going to match with the information that is provided with other sources. It's going to connect things. But I want to show you one certain place on this map. You see Ethiopia right there. Now today, Ethiopia is over here, right? Ethiopia is up here, but Ethiopia is right down here. As you can see, here's just a clear understanding of it. We see Sudan, right? Sudan. These are the real Ishmaelites that were down here in these areas, right? And in Guinea was actually the real Israelites in this area right here. Let's go down. So now let's get some understanding here. Here's Guinea again. There's another one that's older. Guinea stretched out. See Timbuktu and whatnot. You can see right here, this is actually Guinea, right? You got the Ashanti down there. You got the what they call many coasts. A lot of times you'll see where the slave coast will be, right? You see Benjamin, things like that. That's actually going to be down here. Different groups that's going to be down in these areas that's going to be settled here, right? Very, very interesting to see those things. Let's go down a little bit. Here's the DNA of the land, right? Now, it's important to understand this in the sense of understanding. These are going to be your E-Clyde. They're going to be your E. So these lighter ones and these darker ones, they're going to be your E. But there's also going to be some groups in these areas that's going to have B lineages, right? And A lineages. Those are going to be smaller groups of people, right? You're going to have your A and your B for the sake of understanding. So how did Israel how did Israel get pushed into Africa for the sake of understanding? Let's just see a quick little breakdown how they got pushed into Africa.
Okay, we're going to go over the book,
I'm going to show you real fast.
Story Revised Edition, and this is written by Edgar Shaw. We're going to start with the first subtitle here, and it's entitled The Expulsion of the Jews from Spain and Portugal. You can kind of read through the paragraph here. In the year AD 1492, January 2nd, the Moorish stronghold of Granada surrendered to the armies of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. For the first time since the year 711, all of Spain was in Christian hands. The decree to expel the Jews from Spain was signed on March 31st in one of the corridors of the great Alhambra, the palace of the Moorish kings of Granada. So this was signed in one of the great palaces that these Moorish kings who previously had ruled in that land had built. It says the motive given for the expulsion of the Jews was that it was conceive that they corrupted the Marranos, which were basically the Jews that converted to Christianity during the time of the Inquisition. This was done by privately encouraging them in disloyalty to Christianity. The ultimatum given to the Jews elapsed or expired August the 1st, 1492. Professor Alan H. Godbey says that the last Jewish king was overruled in Ghana, terminated in 1492. So basically, the rulership of the Jews was terminated 1492 in Ghana. It says in order to satisfy Queen Isabella of Spain, basically the
Now, real fast, it just talked about Ghana here, right? You see Ghana right there? I'm gonna see if I can open up the map here, or I'll just type it down. I want to show you Ghana on a map. You see what it just said there in that source? Where was Israel ruling? Where was some of them ruling at? You see right there, the Jews. You can see that they had a king, right? Where was their king? In Ghana. But his kingdom was terminated in 1492, right? And then that's where they put the people there and made a slave trade. That's actually where the slave trade happened. This is Ghana, right? He said a king. He said, did you ever hear that before? That a Jewish king was ruling in Ghana? Let me just put a map. This is Africa. See right here? That's where a Jewish king was ruling. They can't deny it. That's a fact. There was a Jewish king that was in from Spain, that was ruling here, that Spain was watching over. And then when the time came to 1492, they took the rulership from the Jewish king. That's a fact. That's a historical fact, that there was a Jewish king ruling in the west part of Africa. If there was a Jewish king here, guess who else was there? Jews. There were Jews in the west part of Africa. That's undeniable. That's a historical fact. Many historians actually know that to be true, without a doubt. That's a historical fact, and there's no denying it. But let's continue reading this interesting source on this information. So I want to show you that because I think that was very, very interesting for the sake of understanding. Amen. Amen. That's hopefully this day I bring forth some information that brothers have never seen before. Because I know there's a lot of people bringing this information out, but I want to bring out some things that I think is going to really bring strength to the Bible.
The rulership of the Jews was terminated 1492 in Ghana. It says in order to satisfy Queen Isabella of Spain, King Manuel of Portugal declared a royal ordinance expelling the Jews and Moors from his country. This was nothing new for the Jews. If you read back into the scriptures, you'll read that there was a point in time in which Claudius Caesar had expelled the Jews from Italy. So this was done over and over in times in the past. Okay, it says the Jews who were expelled from Spain and Portugal were scattered. Of course, we read in Deuteronomy 28 and 64 that this was a prophecy that they would be scattered throughout. So they were scattered throughout the Mediterranean coast. It is estimated that over 100,000 Jews departed from Spain and Portugal during the persecutions and expulsions. Some of these Jews went to northern and western Africa. These black Jews, so now he's telling you who they were. He's telling you that they're black Jews. This is the color. This is a description of what they look like. These black Jews would innocently go to African countries, most of all because of the less persecution, and they could semblance themselves easily among blacks. So they can basically camouflage themselves amongst the other blacks in the African lands. R.H.M. Elves gives a vivid description of the Portuguese Jew. Baruch Spinoza, middle-sized, good features, skin somewhat black, black curly hair, long eyebrows of the same color. So that one might know by his looks that he was a descendant from the Portuguese Jews. When the Jews were expelled from Spain, about 100,000 entered Portugal. So 100,000 of these Jews from Spain entered into Portugal by the admission of King John II.
All right, so this is actually going to be important to understand. This is where we got to understand Spain now, right? In the area of Spain, this thing will open. In the area of Spain, there's an area called Portugal right here, right? This is going to be Spain, and then there's an area of Portugal. This is where, so the Jews were all in these areas, and then they settled in Portugal. And they're going to see what's going to happen when they get into these areas and how they're going to get pushed out into what is called the transatlantic slave trade. Few people actually know this is where it began. These are the owners of the transatlantic slave trade. Very, very deep information to that.
It says they were allowed to enter under the condition that they pay the poll tax, with that sense that they would leave the country within 8 months. So they had to pay a poll tax to get in, of course, understanding that in 8 months they would be again expelled from that land as well. Also, at this time, the king beholden himself to take the Jews wherever they desired at the completion of 8 months. So the king promised that after 8 months, I'll take you wherever you want. I'll set up ships so the ships can take you wherever you want to go. When the time elapsed, many Jews were stranded because the king did not provide enough ships in time. So the king didn't provide the ships during the allotted time of 8 months. It came 8 months, 3 months, 8 months, 3 weeks, maybe 9 months, but they didn't come in time. As a result, all the black Jews who were left behind were deprived of their freedom and sold into slavery, thus fitting the prophecy that you would be sold into slavery by way of ships. During the reign of King John II, or actually John II, 700 black.
You see this name right here, King Joan II or John II. We're gonna look at this name right here. I'm gonna show you one of the most deepest historical quotes you've ever seen. That's gonna put it all together in sequence. As I want to find the most strongest historical quote I can possibly find, and I'm gonna show you one from a real book. It's gonna be a book early on, 1784. It's going to be a very interesting quote, and it's going to blow your mind. I think it's going to be very interesting for the sake of understanding to see all these things in sequence. So let me not go too far down. As few people actually know that Israel actually went into Africa, how they settled in these areas. And this area was taken by the Portuguese and the Angola women. And it's mentioned in historical quotes without any denial that the Jews were mixing with the women of Africa, with the Angola women, and the women of Africa were actually the same lineage as them. They were the same. They was actually E1B1A. They were exactly the same. The Angola women. We go up a little bit. So in these areas, right? Remember I showed you that the one that reigned in these areas. So 92%, 93% are actually going to be E1B1A. 93%. We go up a little bit. As this information, I'm going to go through, and not a lot of information, but it's very interesting to see. So you can see what he was showing here on this little quote. Very, very interesting information. But let's hear the rest of this, because this actually is good information to understand.
Hebrew children were ruthlessly taken away from their parents in Portugal. So this was an abrupt takeover. They were just taking kids from their parents in Portugal and transporting to the island of Saint Torme off the west coast of Africa.
All right, so let's pull up that historical quote real fast, because I want you to see it now. So you see how he just said about this King John II, right? King John II. And then he talks about the children that were forcibly, as you can see right there, they were taken, right? They were forcefully baptized, right? The children, these are going to be children, right? The Portuguese, right? They were the first ones to settle in that area. It's important to know that that island that they settled at, they was the only ones to settle there, right? For the sake of understanding, when they took Saint Tomé in 1471. You can see right here, during the reign of King John, right? John II, 700 Black Hebrew children were ruthlessly taken away from their parents in Portugal and transported to the island of Saint Tomé. Okay, so let's look at that information. Let's look at the history of the island of Saint Tomé and see if we can find any evidence of Israel being in Spain. And do we have any evidence of it being children? And do we have any evidence that the people were actually sent to Saint Tomé? Do we have any evidence to these historical documents? Yes. I want to show you something real fast. I want to show you this little image right here. This is a summary of what basically happened. You see right here in Portugal. In Portugal, the people were sent down to what is called, this word right here, Bantu, means the original people's homeland. Bantu means people, for the sake of understanding. You can see right here, they were sent from Portugal and they were sent down to here in these areas. See, Angola, this is what the Portuguese had in Angola, and these were actually Israelites. They were Israelites in this area. And this is what they call a Bantu expansion, because they were in these areas and they moved around these areas. But these were all the same people. And this is where they were pulling the slaves from. They were in the slave coast. They would come here and pull the slaves from here. And this is actually where the Jews were sent. The Jews were sent down here into these areas. Where, remember how we seen a king was reigning down here? So we had a bunch of Israelites that were actually down here in these areas. Let's look at some interesting information. Let's look at first, let me show you this, 330. Portuguese Empire. I'm going to go to 330 on here. Very interesting information.
Atlantic current. He rounds the Cape and sails up the east coast of Africa. He's warmly received by the Sultan of Malindi.
Now, this video is actually just migrations of the Portuguese and how they moved around. This one I'm not going to go over right now, but this is a 3-part video. Very interesting to see. I also got this in the description. Very interesting to see what actually where the Portugals go, because they actually have a place in what is called Goa, or Goa, and it's in India, and that's where their Pope was. That was actually connected with Spain. Let me close this. Close this too, because that's not opening. I'm gonna close this one. All right, Jews, what's in that right here? I just want to make sure this is that what I just showed you. You see what I showed you right here. So this just talks about the peoples and whatnot. Let me close this. Let's go down a little bit. All right, I showed you that. Now let's look at something. I want to show you some rare reports. These are some very rare reports to find, as I never found them before until I started asking the question, and I found some very interesting things. Got to move the ads. All right. Now these things have too much ads, but it's all right. I'm going to show you this. As you can see, it says it's 2 years old. That's all right. Age only refines history. Age only refines history, so that when you look at these things, the more truth you have from it, the more you understand it. Just waiting for this video to finish what it's doing. All right. So check this out. I want to read this article to you because it's very interesting. Archaeologists find bound bodies of so-called enslaved Africans. Are these enslaved Africans in the Portuguese trash dumps? Let's see what actually these are. These are children. These are actually children. It's very important to understand that 150 skeletons were found in Lagos, right, in Portugal, for the sake of understanding, and they were in a burial sites, right? And it's basically letting you know that these were the so-called Bantu-speaking populations, right? Bantu means peoples, for the sake of understanding. They just call them peoples. Notice that this person, you can see this is actually a child. Their arms is tied behind them. You can see their legs right there. Their face is forward. They're bound, right? They were actually, and it was a couple of them that was bound like this, that was ready to go somewhere, right? Let me show you a different one from here. This is what you're going to see now. You're going to see this where it says, the research team believed that around 1/3 of the skeletons were under 18 years old, and only 3% were from the age 30 or more. You see what it's saying there? Remember how we just seen how it was bringing the children there? Let me read you this historical quote first. Let me read you this history. Now, this is going to be deep. This is going to be real deep, for the sake of understanding. Matter of fact, let me actually show you this first. So you can see these are going to be the children here. All right, I'm going to go down. You can see right here, these genetic analysis reveal that these are actually the Bantus, the West African, the Bantu speaking people. These are the Bantu, for the sake of understanding. These are actually going to be your E1B1A. That's what it's saying there. You can see the research team believes that around 1/3 of the skeletons were under 18 years old, and that only 3% were from people 30 or more. Sounds like they were taking children. They were indeed taking children, and that's what was happening. Let's read the report. So this is going to be, remember King John, right? Remember we was talking about that, King John from Portugal right there. We're going to look at what King John, remember what he did? He took those children and he baptized them, right? He took them, he ruefully took them from their parents. Right here, it doesn't say baptized, but I'm going to show you where it says that. He took them, right? And he transported them to San Tome. Remember that, at the coast of Africa. Okay, watch what happens here. It says King John in 1492 expelled all the Jews to the island of San Tome. All right, that's historical evidence that agree. You can see in Angola right there. Talks about how some of they had also colonies in Angola. So you can see some matching things there. So these ones are going to be in the island of San Tome. And where is San Tome? Let me see if I can open this thing so you can see this. Let me make sure you can hear me. All right, Shalom family. So let me see if this thing will open, because I like to have maps. So I think maps really give understandings to things. There we go. Okay. Okay. So where is San Tome? Right here. So the island of San Tome is basically like at this little hoop of Africa right here, right at the point. And then you can see right there, this is actually San Tome and Principe, for the sake of understanding. This island, we're going to look at, this is where Spain, let me zoom out. This is actually where they sent the people. So you can see right here, you see this little arrow right here? It's actually bringing the people, to this area. They actually settled there. Let me actually go over. All right, let's look. Watch what it says here. So he expelled all the Jews to the island of San Tome, right? St. Thomas, which had been discovered in 1471. So we just noticed that they found it in 1471, and to other Portuguese settlements on the continent of Africa. See, the continent of Africa was settled by the Portuguese. Where are they banishing them? Who are they banishing? The Jews. Why are they banishing them in Africa? Have you ever heard this? And from these banished Jews, the Black Portuguese, as they are called, and the reason why they're called Black Portuguese, because they were in Portugal, where most of them were actually European, but then you got some of the people that were still there that were Jews, and they were darker skinned. That's why they call the Black Portuguese. These banished Jews, the Black Portuguese, as they are called, and the Jews of Lingado, who are these F's always give me, despised even by the very Negroes, are descended. It's basically letting us know that these Jews, the reason why they were despised is because they converted to Catholicism. So they were hated by their own. They were hated by their own and are descendant of them. They're saying that they were hated by the Negroes and are descended from the Negroes. You see what it's saying there? And are descended from the Negroes, for the sake of understanding. But they were hated by them. They were despised by the very Negro and are descended. By these colonists, St. Thomas soon became a considerable place for trade, right? You see what's going on there? And plantations, sugar plantations. Sugar plantations, they had a lot of sugar plantations that were going on in the slave trade. Very, very, very labor-inducing work, right? 30 years after their settlement, not less than 100. Basically, there was a couple of sugar farms and whatnot that they had turned slaves to. And notice it says these Negroes were purchased in Guinea, Congo, and was that Congo. And the colonists had plantations furnished with 150, basically, they had slaves, as they say, Negro slaves. And remember, the Portuguese, as the Black Portuguese, which are the Jews, the ones that were banished, they're actually descended from them. They're descended from the Negroes, from the very Negro. It's very important to understand. They knew that they were all related. So it's actually letting us know that the transatlantic slave trade was actually filled right here, by which the Negroes' trade was rapidly increased. So it's actually the Portuguese. Few people actually know that the Portuguese actually owned, maybe tomorrow, maybe y'all willing, I'll show a video that Thoughts Camera Action goes over that I think we need to talk about. So it's so deep. It actually talks about how the people went into Brazil, how they actually moved the Jews into Brazil and they settled in these areas and the New Indies and things like that. Very important to see that when that happens later on. But they first settled in Africa. This is firstly where they settled at, in St. Thomas, right? They actually put them in these areas. There's Guinea, right? This actually, at that time, all this was Guinea. And remember, in this area, there was a king of the Jews that reigned here, right? This is real history, real history that few people actually know. That what you've seen there was actually the origin of the transatlantic slave trade. That's what you just seen there from Spain that ran. You can look it up yourself. Who started the transatlantic slave trade? This is actually who started the transatlantic slave trade, Spain. They had the power over it, and this is where they had the people. So you can see they actually went into different areas. So a lot of covering up. Now let's look at let's look at genetic information. Now you've just seen historic information. Now let's look at genetic information on these people in the Isles of San Tome, right? Let's read an introduction. This is going to be a genetic information study. This is a real genetic information study. Let me show you. Let me go down a little bit. So right here, it's a PDF. I just want to show you for the sake of the live, what I'm going to show you is going to be a real life genetic informative study on the people of San Tome. Right, we see right here, San Tome and Principe are the two main isles of a small island of Gulf of Guinea, whatnot. We're going to look at that and see who is on that island and everything. I'm going to show you something here. First, let's read this. Let's read this because this is going to be the direct introduction to these things. In fact, also, I'm going to show you that historians agree with this, without a doubt. Historians actually agree to this. This is something that you can see yourself. I'm going to show you a historian that agrees with the information that I'm going to show you real fast. Let me actually go to a note. Right here. All right. I'll let that open up real fast, and then I'm gonna come right back to that. All right, so let's see what happened around here. It says San Tome Islands were probably uninhabited at the time of the Portuguese discovery in 1471. Look at that, how many confirmations of 1471 when they found San Tome, right? No one else was there. It was a private island. Soon after that, the first settlements took place in 1486. So they started settling the area, right? So they were settled in that area, that name right there. We're going to look at John II, right? Who took with him many Jews. Look at this genetic information is saying in the Isles of San Tome, many Jews came to San Tome. One of the most controversial episodes of this colonization is the forced migration of Jewish children in 1492. The information about this occurrence is scarce and diverse between the Jewish and Christian historians. So it's saying that not a lot of people know about this stuff. Around 2,000 young children and teenagers. Remember, we just seen the evidence of that in Spain, they were tying up children and teenagers. Because remember, they took those children and teenagers and they forcefully, as it says, were taken from their families. Remember, we seen that when he said that, talking about they were taken from their families. So black children, black Hebrew children were ruthlessly taken from their parents in Portugal and transported to the islands of San Tome, right? In the coast of Africa. You see what's going on there? Okay, let's continue on. So let's continue. It says around 2,000 young children and teenagers, which we have evidence of them in Portugal, were taken from their families, forcefully baptized and sent to the little islands so that they could be away from the Jewish faith. Because if they was away from the Jewish faith, guess what they'll start to become like? Probably not that Jewish. They probably wouldn't be having Jewish practices. They'd probably be doing practices like everyone else, and that's what their goal was, so that they wouldn't be, you wouldn't be able to distinguish them by their practices. So they wanted them to grow up with a Christian education, right? Catholic education, for the sake of understanding, and contribute to the population of the new territory. They contributed to the population of the new territory. That means they actually increased. They didn't wipe them out. They increased and stayed in the island. They lived on the island. One of the main aims of the Portuguese king of Goy, this is actually going to be John III. So this is after John II. Several documents confirm that many of these children, watch this, several documents confirm that many of these children survived and along with other settlers. So we're going to see who the other settlers are, and we're going to see who the people are that actually went to the island, mainly of African origin. They say they have African origin. Very important to understand the reason why they say African origin. Even the ancient historians, Tacitus in 55 AD even said that the Jews had an Ethiopian origin. He said it seemed like they had an Ethiopian origin. So that's what that play right there is basically talking on. Watch what it says here. Started the process of, I'm gonna go down a little bit. Okay, so So they were actually called new Christians for the sake of understanding. Only the Jews were called new Christians. Only the Jews were called new Christians. Now let's look at the genetic information. Let's look at the genetic study. It's going to be very interesting. Let's see the genetic study. Yep, and you can check out that a lot of the people in South America, their haplogroup is E1B1A. A lot of their haplogroup is E1B1A. Some of them are E1B1A, a small portion, and then you can find some with the R. Watch what it says right here. I'm going to show you the information to this study. Haplogroup composition obtained for the basically Jewish descendants from San Tome. These are going to be the real descendants from San Tome. It's going to look at 240 individuals. It's going to look at what they actually have in them, right? For the sake of understanding, what they actually say is oh, they don't have the Jewish haplogroups. We already disproved that. J and T are not even Jewish. These are actually Turkish lines. We can even look at the information at T right here. Here's a lineage of T where it talks about where it comes from and everything, a little information on those things. I'm not going to go over it right now, as I just go over some things about T and whatnot. Go over here. So obviously, we don't need to look for the lines that we already proved to be Turkish. There's no need to do that. Even our good old pal Nathaniel Jensen, he himself says the J is Japhetic. He himself says it, which I agree to, and any other geneticist who looks at the charts would agree 100%. Now it says, watch what it says right here. It basically talks about, let me go over to the next one, because this is actually what we're going to look at here. You see this E1B1A, M2, E1B1A, M191, and then you see some other branches there because they actually have some other mix in these areas. So you can see them R is actually going to be your Japhetic lines, right? You can have some R's there. So you can have some R males that mix with the females. And then you have the E1B1A. Very important to understand, this majority of the Jews in San Tome are still pure. Majority of the Jews in San Tome are still pure. Very important to understand that. Majority, 83%, are actually going to be E1B1A. Very important. We can also find the lines, these L. This is how we know they're Israel, because they got the L lines. These are the L lines. Sometimes you can also see this H line. This is actually a mix. That H is because a mix that had happened there. There's a mix that had happened in there. So some of the women of the European probably also mixed in the population of the Israelites. And you can also see those L's there. So those L's are going to be your common L's in Israel. Let's go over here. So now let's get a closer understanding of this. So this is going to be a haplogroup tree, right? The sub-haplogroup groups found in San Tome y Principe populations. So let's see what a geneticist says about this. Is there any other historical evidence that does credit to this besides all this extra information for the sake of understanding? Here is a historian. I'm gonna let him give a historical quote. So this is some information on him and whatnot. So he's British. He's a historian and whatnot. So we're gonna look at that. You can see some of his education in some places. University of Oxford, right? You can see some of his degrees and whatnot. His discipline is Jewish studies, so he knows a lot about Jewish studies. So very interesting to see these things. So let's see what he actually says about some of the things that's going on there.
Some of my recent work, if you read the hybrid very attentively, you'll have to go to the footnotes. You will see there's got a lot of evidence produced for Black Jewish communities in different parts of West Africa, which are not sort of based upon a particular reading of tribal history, let's put it like that, but are based on fairly hard historical fact. And this hard historical fact is the expulsion of the Jews from Spain and from Portugal at the end of the 15th century, subsequent to which a lot of Jews settled, first of all, in northwest Africa, places like Senegal, in the islands, which I'm sure you know about, Saint Tomé and Principe.
Yes, sir.
Principally. And then less known along the coast of Guinea, so that in the middle of the 16th century, 1560 to be precise, the Portuguese Archbishop of Goa in India proclaimed that Judaism is a kind of horrible illness which has killed millions of people throughout history, and the result of being Jewish was to be covered in shame, to fail in everything, even among the Black Jews of Guinea. So, in other words, the existence of Jews in the western part of Africa was absolutely accepted at the time by the likes of the Portuguese Archbishop of Goa.
So he basically let us know that, remember, I let you know that from Spain, they actually brought some people to areas of India, and they settled in India for the sake of understanding. They actually settled there, and they had a king there in Goa, right here. They had and this is where their pope was. This is where their leader was, for the sake of understanding. That was calling the shots over here. He was calling the shots over here, saying what's going to happen with the Inquisition and stuff like that when they brought them in there and was doing what they was doing. And then they put the people, remember the people moved to Portugal, and they told them they had 8 months. They told them they had a few months to stay there. Then what they do? They took the children and forced the children all the way down here, right? And then you remember some Jews were ruling over here, right? That's historically confirmed that some Jews were ruling down there, and there was Jews all the way down in these areas, right? They all had the same lineages. And remember, the children that were taken were found over here. Same haplogroup. All of them had the same haplogroup. All of them. Every single one of them. Nothing different. All of them had the same haplogroup. Let me close these. So let's take a look here. So M2 right here is going to be this is actually going to be your E3A. This is your M2, your E1B1A. Right here is going to be, mostly of them are going to be 84% for the sake of understanding. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that someone's a small percentage. Every single one is a full percentage. But when we talk about a mass of the population, right, if we was to have 100 people, 84 of them would be pure Israelites. And some of them would be, as you see right here, the second most common haplogroup in San Tomé y Principe is R1b, which is 8.7%. It says a typical haplogroup from Western Europe, most likely carried by Portuguese settlers, suggesting their genetic contribution to this population. So it's letting us know that these groups were actually mixing with the real people. If you haven't heard of San Tomé or Principe, it's about time that you had heard the truth, family. So now that you know this, you actually know something that few people are actually going to be able to know or be able to handle the information of these things, right? So you can see a little bit of what they look like, right? The ones of San Tomé and Principe, right? It looks like a nice island resort. It looks like that. You can see who's there. You can see a lot of these islands, like the Bahamas and stuff, they looked beautiful in our time, but at the time when a lot of these were there, it was torture camps. That's what a lot of these were actually horrible camps of slavery and abuse, all types of levels of abuse, for the sake of understanding. So understand that what you just seen there is a lot of information to provide a stable understanding to who these people are. You can also see the children. Let's see if I have a link to the children somewhere. Let me see. At least I thought I did. I'll just go and down. So obviously, if you want to, you can look them up. The children of San Tomé and Principe. You can see what they look like, for the sake of understanding. Here, I'll show you an example. You can see these are going to be the children of San Tomé and Principe. You can see some of them mixed. You can see how mixed they are. There's a very mixed, very clearly mixed features right there. So you can see these are the ones in San Tome, Principe. See if we can find any more mixed. This one seems kind of mixed. So you can see, get an idea of them, right? A lot of them went to this. They went there to become normal Catholics, right? They wanted to separate them from a lot of those things that were going on. Here's some. These one may be group mixed. They look mixed. You see, just looking a little more. So these are the children. These are the children of San Tome and Principe. This one looks fairly mixed right there. So you can see, because the population in that area was also going to have some, obviously, the Jews with the Portuguese, for the sake of understanding. They were settled there. It was a private island. Only they were there, for the sake of understanding. You can also find in their genetic, which is also interesting, a little bit of Arab in them, which makes sense because they were in Portugal, right? They were in Portugal mixing with the Moors, right? That would happen. Some were mixing with the Moors. That would happen without a doubt. Let's go down a little bit. There's obviously a super small portion though. Now, if you look at, the interesting thing is none of this information applies to the Ashkenazi nor to the people who they call Sephardim, for the sake of understanding. Because if you actually look at the history, that is actually real history behind their history, it actually points against the fact of where the people actually went. They went into Africa. The people were forced into Africa, and it's highly detailed on what they look like, highly detailed. So many different sources that, as you see, even a historian said Black Jews that went into Africa. You see what he's saying there? Now, understand this. This is all truth. It's about truth. The problem with the generation that we have today, because many are comfortable with the narrative of the world, they get uncomfortable upon hearing the actual genetic and historic linguistic biblical truth of what actually is going on in the world that we're in. Obviously, for the sake of understanding, we need to understand what's actually going on in the world that we're in, so that we don't become like those that are just filled with hate and wickedness. Because the truth is, when we look at the truth of the matter, we need to understand that the world we live in is a crazy world, for the sake of understanding. Even look at this, look how this rabbi treats those who have a darker skin complexion. We got to remember racism exists.
לא הכל כושים מברכים, אלא צריך שיהיה כושי שאב.
I want to read this. I want to read to you what he's saying right here, because I think it's very, very wicked. Okay, so see what he's saying here? We don't say a blessing for every Negro. He needs to be a Negro whose father and mother are white, whose father and mother are white. That's what he just said there. He says we don't bless every Negro. He has to be a Negro whose father and mother is white. You know, they had a monkey as a son. This is obviously genetic blasphemy. This is genetic blasphemy and nonsense. It says they had a son like that. It's crazy. Obviously, people condemned it. But if these are going to be the leaders, for the sake of understanding, how can you imagine what's actually going on in the backgrounds? What's actually going on in the background? If people are willing to speak like that openly, still, surely there's a lack of discipline these times. You can see right here, absolutely racist. Now, these ones are actually going to be your E1B1B. A lot of these are actually going to be your E1B1B lineages, for the sake of understanding, just for clarity. But there would be some E1B1A there. But more in certain areas, you'll find certain groups. But still, that is a obviously non-historical nor genetic verifiable information that he basically provided, but he just showed how ignorant the world is in the times that we are in. We are in a very, very desperate world to hear the truth. Now let's hear the truth, because if we hear the truth, we are the generation to bring forth the truth. If we don't bring forth the truth, the next generation will. Understand that somebody's going to bring forth the truth, and I think it needs to be us. Let us bring forth the truth. Right now, let's talk about this A00. Now, there is another lineage that is called A00 that I'm going to open up another note and talk about. as I seen some people try to turn A00 into Hamites, as they do not understand the information that has been provided before about A00. A00 has to be studied dedicatedly. You can't just take everyone's information and take it and run with it. You got to understand A00. How is A00, right? A00 is a private lineage, and they know it. A00 is a private lineage. It is not connected to anyone else, but is only found in those. I'm going to read it right here. First, let's read this. It's like a last piece of evidence. In fact, it built the whole haplogroup tree, A00. Few people know it. It says the A00 participants descends from a former slave family in South Carolina. The closest matches were found in Western Cameroon, near the Gulf of Guinea. Okay, who's in Guinea? Well, Israel, a prime location in the slave trade. There appears to be about 500 years between the participant and the samples from Cameroon, an age that speaks to the beginning of the slave trade. So that's actually who we find it in. Now let's see what they say about A00. We named A00. We then estimate. So they named it. It's important to understand that they named it. Let me show you something. Why this is important to know that they named it. Why is that important? Let me just show you that, because few people actually know the importance in naming things. They actually name many things on purpose. Let me see, right here. When was the last time A could migrate out? Let me see. I'm looking for a certain one. Okay, I think this is it. All right, so obviously, like I was talking about before, none of the A's descend into BT or CT lineages, right? So they obviously doesn't make no sense for them to do that. And they say, how can it basically this is what they say. So how can they be claimed as ancestral or non-African lineages? None of actual bearers of haplogroup A0T, A1, A1B have been found in Africa or elsewhere, because A lineages aren't always found in Africa. Don't let the idea of all the A lineages are in Africa. That's not true. Not all the A lineages are in Africa. In fact, there are some that are not found in Africa, like A0T, A1, A1B have not been found in Africa or elsewhere. It says, so how they can be claimed as African just because, watch what it says here, just because they are assigned A letter in the index. A means the haplogroup A. They're basically saying just because they're assigned haplogroup A in the index. But watch what it says right here. So that's why A, you got to note A00 is they named it A00. It's not that it shows signs of being connected to A lineages. No, they named it. As we see, all those conjunctions by the basically out of Africa idea concept are groundless for the sake of understanding. The idea of changing information and altering it, they actually, this is a geneticist saying that a lot of the information of the out of Africa idea is groundless. They assume, watch what it says here, they assume that the current, they assume it. That means this is not a fact. They assume that the currently African haplogroups, A00, why they say African? Because they're found in Africa, right? They're found in West Africa. And remember, I told you that this is where Israel was. And this is the only place they find it, in the area of Cameroon. And I'm going to show you that's actually where they find it. And in a large portion of African Americans. Let me show you something. Let me go to here. In fact, we see where's the notes right here, notebooks. Let me go to that. Let me show you something also on this, as A00 is one of the most complex lines of any haplogroup you can ever find, for the sake of understanding. And I mean it's seriously one of the most complex pieces of information that we find. So let's talk about that. It says right here, they assume that the current African haplogroup A00, A0, A1, and A1B, now these are going to be your more Hamite lines right here, but these two are not. And we're going to talk about that. It says descend, they assume that these descend from African haplogroups, and those were A0T, A1, A1B. In reality, this has never been shown. this has never been shown. It's basically saying these A00 is not connected to these for the sake of understanding. It's not saying they need to descend from them for the sake of understanding. It says in reality, this has never been shown. Those haplogroups represented forks, and understand almost all of these are now going to be A00 for the sake of understanding. Because let me show you something. When they first found this, they thought it was just one person, but then they found it in a large portion. Here's the area where they found it. Right here. These are going to be the areas where they found a lot of them. So you can see a lot of finds over here. Let me go up. So right here in Cameroon, for the sake of understanding. And a lot of the ones in Cameroon are actually going to be basically Israelites. I got an interesting video here of their traditions that they do over there. And they have a lot of Israelite traditions. I'll show you real fast, just a little sample of these tribes over here.
To the four corners.
Let me see if I can find.
Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it well. Just forgive me. Kara is a Hebrew word. And key word, you can do your own research. Keyword is 37.
So this is, I'm not going to go over this right now, but this is really interesting. A little interesting information. If you want to see that, it just talks about the Cameroon Israelites. For the sake of understanding, I can show you that. But you can look on the maps. Obviously, they have maps that saying the Jews were in Africa, right? You can see the land of Juda, right there, slave coast, kingdom of Juda, right there. Multiple maps that have the same writings. But let me show you something. Go up here, right? I told you where they got them from. This is going to be about the Y chromosome of Adam, right? I'm going to read this to you. We report the discovery of an African-American Y chromosome that carries the ancestral state of all snaps. Do you know what that means? That basically means they have every single ancient SNP in them. They have, and this is actually technically impossible. Understand that. It says that define the basal portion of the Y chromosome basically tree for the sake of understanding. It basically breaks their records, but is what they're saying. That's why it's actually a novel find. It says the extremely ancient age combined with the rarity of A00 lineages, which we also find at very low frequencies in Central Africa, right? Go down a little bit. They talk about they need to build a more complex model, right? They talk about because it changes a lot of things. It says the A00 lineage was discovered in a large database of consumer samples of African Americans and has not, and I repeat, this is the most important thing to understand, and has not been identified with traditional hunter-gatherer populations of sub-Saharan Africa. You got to know what they're talking about there. They're talking about A and B lineages. They're talking about A and B lineages. They say basically the lineage of A00 is not found in an AB lineage. It's only found in those who they call African American, which is commonly seen that they're going to be E1B1A for the sake of understanding. But understand, A00 produces A00. It's important to understand, and we're going to look at that A00 doesn't make any other branch. It does not mutate. I'm going to show you for the sake of understanding that it is always going to be what it is. It's not going to be like an A00 or anything like that. It's just what it is. Let me read this to you. Okay, so I'm going to read this right here. So they right here, we named A00. So they named it A00. And remember that even the geneticists said themselves, they assume these things. And because they assign a letter in the index, because they put the A there for the sake of understanding, they could have called it A, they could have called it E1B100 for the sake of understanding. They could have easily called it that because it would be more fitting. But let me show you something, what they say here. So they find that and everything, they named it A00. It says, we then estimate the time to, they basically says that the recent most common ancestor, that's what that is, the recent most common ancestor for, basically it says almost 300,000 years ago, which we know is a lie for the sake of understanding. But the reason why is because they're counting the number of SNPs on it. They're counting the number of mutations on it. And they're saying for it to have that much mutations, it must be very old. It must be very old for that much mutations. But understand, it's not just mutations on this. It has every single one. It makes no sense. I'm going to show you when we look at a chart what it actually looks like. Remarkable. Look at the word they say there. Remarkable. This is C's current estimates of the NT is basically saying it's older than even mtDNA. right? Recent common ancestor, as well as those of the age of the oldest, basically modern human fossil, saying it's older than the modern human fossil, right? The extremely ancient age combined with the rarity of the A00 lineage, which we find also at very low frequencies in Central Africa, point to the more complex, they need different models and everything. They need a new model for all those things. It says the A00 lineage was discovered in a large database of consumer samples of African Americans and has not been identified with traditional hunter-gatherer populations from sub-Saharan Africa. All right, this underscores how whatnot and whatnot for the sake of understanding. Let's go over here. Let's take a look at A00 so you can see what it looks like. I want to show you what this looks like. Now, when you see this at first, now, if you understand a little bit of genetics, then you'll actually understand that A00 is basically impossible. It's basically impossible. It basically means that the person descended directly from Adam and didn't break to Ham, Shem, and Japheth, which is impossible. That's technically impossible because this is the split of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. But we understand that A00 is a lineage of its own. It does not descend to any other lineage. It does not descend to any other lineage. No other lineage descends into it. It does not descend to another lineage. It's its own lineage that has all the SNPs, and they was able to make the tree because of A00. It's important to understand A and B, right? You see how these are kind of separate like that? These are actually, all of these are actually under BT. All of these. Everything is under BT, but A00 isn't. A00 isn't from BT, nor does it descend into BT, nor does it descend from BT. That's really deep when you actually think about that. It is just a lineage that's there that has every piece of information to all these things. You almost consider it as a concept. You can see right here, A00, this is actually what it would really look like. A00 disconnected from, these are your normal lineages. Now, remember how I told you it's important to know that A doesn't descend, right? They actually know for a fact A doesn't descend. None of these A's descend, none of them descend into BT, CT lineages, just to understand for the sake of understanding. So actually BT would be up here and then your A's would be down here for the sake of understanding, for clarity, as they are all underneath BT for the sake of understanding. So you see your BT, get your E lineage, got your G's and your R's, your B and your A, everything right there for the sake of understanding. These are going to be your Hamitic. You're going to be a Japhetic. It's going to be your Shemitic lines right there. A00. So A00, for the sake of understanding, isn't connected to none of these. They know it. They know it for a fact. It's not a normal branch. It's not a normal branch. It's not a branch that is just like a normal branch of these branches. It is a different branch. It is like the sign of Aaron, for the sake of understanding. And understand this. People can say what they want about it, but unless they actually know what it looks like when you put it on a chart, they don't really know what A00 is. And they know it. That's why it's way up here. It's way up there. And we know that understand this when I say this. Let me just show you this so you understand this. Anyone who understands the Bible will understand this without a doubt. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you something real fast. Let's go over here. Let me go to that classic little thing right here. Yes. All right, make sure you can hear me right here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to show you this. You see this design right here? This is what they want you to believe. And this is a false lie. This is what they want you to believe. That from A came forth C's and came forth K's and came forth R's. That's what they want you to believe. That everyone started in the beginning. Everyone began as an A and a B lineage. That's a lie. That's a false lie. You see how they'll say everyone started. In fact, let's just say it like that. Everyone started as an A lineage for the sake of understanding. That's a false lie because A doesn't descend into BT for the sake of understanding. They want you to believe, understand this. They want you to believe that a Hamite made a Japhethite. What's the problem with that? Well, two, Hamites are younger than Japhethite, right? Ham is the youngest son. Japheth is the elder. So how can the eldest actually come from the youngest, first of all? So Hamites don't make Japhethites. We know that for a fact. That just made clear sense. And therefore, even their own information even validates it. They even validate this information, as they say, for example, right here. You can see right here about Haplogroup BT. You can see Haplogroup BT right there. You know, that's what they're talking about here. They say right here, it is obvious. It is obvious that haplogroup BT does not descend from African haplogroups having index A, since all of them are positioned in the upper part of the tree. It's just letting you know that they all descend from that for the sake of understanding. They actually all descend from BT. So it's important to understand that A index actually descends, it actually goes this way. This is the split. They go this way, they descend down for the sake of understanding. A00 is its own, right? Don't let the name A00 trick you, right? Don't let the name A00 trick you. It is not related to Ham or any line but Shem. It's important to understand. That's very, very important to understand, because that is where the clarity comes in to understanding also this other lineage called A00. Because a lot of times we think about the B lineage, but A00 is also important. Shalom, family. All right, so let's close some of these. Close that, and I'm gonna close this. So I want to show you that so you can understand this. Now let's go over. Let's look a little more on these A lineages. This A00, right? Not your A and your B, but your A00, right? Very important. And here's just some examples of some of the tribes in the land. Now remember, our language, a lot of us use English, so a lot of us are writing it how it sounds for the sake of understanding. But remember, a lot of them had older languages, ancient languages, right? There's more than 600 Bantu tribes. Yet the reason why it's that many tribes is because the expansion, they expanded for the sake of understanding. That doesn't mean there's different branches of them, as they know they came from 12 major groups for the sake of understanding. They know that they are actually from the 12. And that's from the geneticists. So you can see right here, this is going to be your A00. Obviously, they tried to link it to monkeys. That was no link. That was just nonsense. So you can see it's disconnected. There's no link there. So you can see right here, this is actually going to send into your A00 right here. These are your A00 lineages. And these are your other lineages. See how it's separate? The two lineages are separate for the sake of understanding. Goes into different lineages. You can see right here is the novel fine. Here is it in a clear sense. You can see it basically goes out like this. These are A00. It's going to be your A00. That's why this is more. Before it was just one line, but they put more lines because they know that a large database of what they say African Americans are actually A00 for the sake of understanding. So A00 is actually going to be connected here, separate from these lines. These are going to be your other lineages. You can see it's going to be your A's, as it says, previously known as Haplogroup A. You can see right here, totally separate from A00. You can see. Let's see with this one. This one is not equals. The A was announced. First found is balanced. Okay, that's something else. So I just want to show you that this actually is a separate lineage. This is everyone else. This is A00, not connected to anyone else. It's not connected. It's like a line that's impossible, yet it is. So you can see A00 separate. This is everyone else. This is everyone else. A lineages, B lineage is not connected to A00. Not connected. It's very important to understand. Right? So you see A00, just for the sake of clarity, they design it not connected with these. And they know it. That's why it's designed like that. You only find it here. You don't find it any, and if it was, and understand, a lot of people call it Y chromosome atom. That's not true, because if it was a Y chromosome atom, you'll find it in everyone. You'll find it in every single person, but it's only found in one type of people down here. It's only found in this group right here, right in this area, which the centerpiece of Israel was. Now there's other lineage. If you found it over here, that's different lineages over here, right? You got your A's over here, B's over here, but the Bantu expansion, as it said, they actually pushed the B and the A out. And they actually, this area was purely E1B1A. We can even look at the charts to see that design on those things. We can get some ideas on those things right here. So it may look like, this may look like different colors. Do it look like different colors? It looks like different colors. But if you actually break it down, these are all E1B1A lineages. All these are E1B1A lineages. So you can see right here, these are your E1B1A lineages right there. So very pure, very, very pure type people. Though it got different SNPs, and different sub-haplogroups, they are still going to be what they are. So I want to touch on some things real fast, on some summaries of some things, because how did they get down here and how did they become so many of them? I'm going to show you now how it became so many of them. All right, it says there is an increasing evidence that the expansion was more complex, right? was a more complex process than originally thought. So at first, they say African. Oh, they're African. Well, we already know who they are. They've been there for forever. Actually, the expansion of them has been more complex than they originally thought, and that neither a single demographic event nor an early split between Western and Eastern groups occurred. So he was saying there, see what it's saying there? Is letting us know that a lot of ideas that they first thought are actually going to be different, right? In this study, they actually study a little more on the E1B1A haplogroup, right? They get a little more understanding on them. Obviously, they still need some more deeper studying on these things, as they need to also match history, the historical information, with the genetic information. As if they're just taking the genetic information, and they're only going to get so far. Here's something called they call it EBSP, which is called the expansion of Bantu speaking people. Remember, that's a weird saying. Is Bantu is people speaking people, right? The expansion of people speaking people, because Bantu actually means people, for the sake of understanding. So I guess the expansion of the people during the past 3,000 to 5,000 years is an event of great importance in the history of humanity. So understanding this E1B1A line is going to give them some understanding for the history of humanity. See what's going on there? So it just talks about some things like the Bantu homeland and whatnot. Obviously, you can't get locational information by genetics. You can't actually get locational information by genetics. So you can see right here, it just talks about a few more things. It talks about there was 2 major waves, right? 2 major waves. The reason why is because if you think about it, there's the North tribe and there's the Southern tribe, right? It's because the separation of 2 major waves around 3,500 years before present. Obviously, be careful with these years. Always understand that their years are never going to be exact. And the sequence isolation of many groups, modern Bantu languages can be divided into West and East Bantu. So that's what I was talking about, those 2 groups, a West and an Eastern Bantu, for the sake of understanding. These are actually going to be involved with the migration. Hold on, let me. Move to a different location. All right. I just had to move to a different location for it to be a little quieter. All right. So let's look at this. So you see what's going on here? So 2 groups in Africa, right? Your Western and your Eastern groups that are going to be in Africa, right? You're going to have some moving throughout the areas. They're going to settle in those areas and whatnot. Let's go over a little bit more, touch on a little more on this. This one just talks about, I think this one is a post. I'm just skip over this one. Okay, so right here in this study, just talk about what they're going to analyze and everything. This and that. I think there's a repost to go over a little bit more. Okay, so this one is the most recent ancestor. So the most recent ancestor, or recent common ancestor for E1B1A, and the whole estimate they say is about 6,000 years ago, with TMCA for the youngest. For the most recent ancestor for the youngest haplogroup group. Basically, what it says is this lineage, listen to when I say this, E1, B1, A8, A1A. It says around 1,000 to almost 2,000 years ago, right? Years before present. That's when the Y haplogroup group froze. This is important to understand, that the information on your haplogroup group is a recorded piece of information of your life, of previous lives. The Y haplogroup group, which even a female can actually find out what is she connected to by taking a male that's near to her, maybe her father or her brother or someone that's very close to her genetically. That's going to actually be someone who she can do a test on, and she can actually find out her historical background by his line. And that's actually how it works. With the Y chromosome, the male is going to be the one that is going to be pointing to, for the sake of understanding. And it's actually letting us know that the information of them is saved in time. It's unchangeable. It's unchangeable throughout all time. So the life is actually written in the blood. the DNA is a language of the information that had happened throughout all generations of time. That's what the DNA actually is, the language of all the information. And this is what you see. This is a summary of what you see in Africa. Remember, Africa, if you haven't seen it, I got a video on E1B1A that talks about these things. Africa, the owners of Africa moved from Arabia. They came down into area. That's why you see it's really dark over here. And then they end up settling over here. So some went down here and settled over here. And some also went over here and actually came into Spain. And you can see some darker areas right there in Spain, right there. They ruled into Spain. And some end up merging with a lot of Rome and a lot of them up there. So you can see right here, they came down into these areas and settled here. So they settled in these areas, and then they came into these areas, and they also settled here. And these were actually the real Ishmaelites. But Israel, remember, Israel was actually forced down. They were forced down here, and they were settled here. They had a king down here that reigned over here, and it was settled in these areas. The Bantu expansion means that the people expanded. The word Bantu means people. Just for the sake of live, I don't know why I didn't show that. Gotta find the definition. Let's see. I want to get you a direct thing. Here's one right here where it just talks about right here the Bantu. It says, or Bantu, it was used by colonists. So the colonists called them Bantu or a Bantu, right? It is the Zulu word for people, right? It actually means people for the sake of understanding. It comes from the form of person for the sake of understanding. So you can see a little bit on the word Bantu on this one right here. This one goes on to a little more direct history on the word Bantu, which actually means people. You can see. Some people actually take it offensive to say Bantu. Some people in that area actually take it offensive to say Bantu. Go over here. So this is where they were settling at. So this is where the people expanded. The people expanded right there. That's what they were called. They weren't called a tribe name. They were actually just called peoples. That's actually what they called them. They called them just peoples. Very important to know that. I'm gonna go down a little bit. So other information for the sake of understanding. Put a space there. So the life is in the blood. This information that I just showed you here is very important information. It's important to, I asked a question. I want to show you real fast a question that I sent over about, because when you see things like, let me show you. Because I had a question, because when I was trying to do research on something, I couldn't find a clear answer to it. So I was trying to work out the understanding of this, but now I got a clear, direct answer to it. I'm going to show you something real fast. When you see things like this, or let me just go to, here's a, okay, like this. Okay, when you see things like this is actually taking a total of the whole population. This is actually taking a total of the whole population, and some people here are going to be R1B, as you can see right here. Some are R1B on this example, and some are going to be I right there. As you can see, some are I, and you can see other examples there, right? See some examples down here from some other lineages and whatnot. So you can see for those things. It's very important to understand that these different shades aren't percentages. They're actually going to be total dedicated Y chromosome groups. Let me show you something. I'll do this for the sake of clarity of truth, as I think is important. Let me go down. As it is important to understand that the Y chromosome does go recombination with the X, right? This is very important information when understanding the Y chromosome. All you have to know is that what they do is actually they don't even for their deeper information, they do study the Y chromosome of the X, of the male. They study the whole thing. But what they give when you buy the information from them, when you go cheap and you probably get a cheaper one, they just give you the sensor information of recombination. Even in the big Y, even if you go a little higher, they don't give you PAR, these outer edges right here, but they give you the part that doesn't go to any recombination. That's where you get haplogroups from, right? You're going to be in this middle area, not this out part right here. This is where you also get some of the changes that can happen by the mother, right? So the outer areas, those are going to be areas that change. These are actually going to be areas, the blue right here is going to be areas of non-recombining region. That's going to be where your Y chromosome information mainly is. Right there. Y chromosome is the smallest part, right? Just talk about a few things there. You can see, go over here. So you can see he's going to have these little tips there, but this is going to be the inner area that they actually read. I'm going to show you what they actually say to give you clarity for genetic information. And the reason why this is important because you got to make sure when I was studying this, I knew there was 3 different information. I've seen a lot of different results and stuff. I'm like, what is up with these results with percentages? I'm like, it must be percentage of the female. A lot of the results you got to be careful is actually autosomal DNA. Autosomal DNA gives you all the DNA, and this is the most confusing piece of information to have. Don't even waste your time getting this type of DNA test. Don't even waste your time doing that. It wouldn't make no sense unless you have a certain goal, a certain reason. But if you're trying to figure out if you're Israel, anything like that, or all those things, get a Y chromosome DNA test. So you can get a direct Y chromosome DNA test, which is of the father's line. The mtDNA just gives you the mother's line, but like I said, it's a little more complex to go through the mother's line. As L's differ for the sake of understanding. Right here, this is where you get those percentages. You get a lot of crazy designs, but those are through different recombinations that actually happen. And that's not what we want to look at. We don't want to look at that because, let me just show you. That's going to be a different section, right? That's going to be right here. Your inner areas right here. This is your autosome, right? Autosome DNA, right? Pair 1 to 22 pairs. Your 23rd one, which is your what they call it the sex chromosomes at the end. Your Y and your X, which gives you your male or female. But these ones are actually your inner ones. Be careful of those type of DNA tests. They can cause confusion for the sake of understanding. Let me go over here. But for clarity, let me show you what the family tree DNA actually says for the sake of understanding. They say this. They say, hello, D. Thank you for contacting Family Tree DNA. PAR regions are small parts compared to the Y chromosome and are excluded. Note this bold area right here. And are excluded from Y DNA analysis and haplogroup placement. So that's very important to understand. So when you see those charts, when you see those little charts like this, understand if you go and get a DNA test, make sure you get one from a Y chromosome DNA test. The reason why a lot of people are getting those percentages is because you're getting different tests, right? Different tests that are going to be testing for different things. So you're going to be sometimes, your mother may be from there, your father may be from there, this father may be from there, and this father may be from there. So if you get a test like that, it can be more complex. But once you get one like Family Tree, I recommend Family Tree if you do get a DNA test. Family Tree DNA, it actually is going to show you that N are excluded, right? The PAR region, which I just showed you with these little small areas over here, right? For the tests that we get and that we do, now they obviously can look at those things and understand them. But the tests that are like when you buy them and everything, you don't get those. It says, and are excluded from Y DNA analysis and haplogroup placement. Haplogroup placements are results of analyzing Y chromosome regions that are related to shared male's line ancestry, right? Share male ancestry for the sake of understanding the same haplogroup. This goes for the example you provided and the rest of the Y haplogroup tree in general. So take note, if you take a test for a male Y haplogroup group, you will get a result with one haplogroup group. For example, E or R or J, right? So sub-branches are just mutations. So for example, what does that mean? Here's an example right here, right? This is a haplogroup group. E is a haplogroup group. So E is a haplogroup group. This is haplogroup E, as you can see right there, right? Haplogroup E, and these are sub-branches. These are mutations. These are sub-branches by having kids. You have different mutations in the chromosome, or you have what is called SNPs, change of SNPs, or change of different things of information and whatnot. So you can see right there. And remember, we know that E1B1 is Abraham. He also brings forth Ishmael. And E1B1A is Isaac. He brings forth two sons, one that has 12 original tribes after him from M2, and another one that is actually going to be your which is your E1B1C, for the sake of understanding. So that's going to be your lines of Israel with the actual historical evidence to match. So you see the genetic information, you see the linguistic information, you see the historic information, and you're seeing it all in harmony all together for the sake of understanding. So obviously, let us understand that the true Israel is not just Israel in the flesh, but in the spirit and the soul. We have to understand that Israel is not Israel unless they're with Christ, unless they're in Jerusalem, unless they're saved, for the sake of understanding, as all flesh is grass. If we don't understand the truth. But I want to provide this to you so you can understand the truth of the matter, that this is also evidence. Israel is evidence of the Bible. The real Israel, if we look at them genetically, and actually as every geneticist agrees with the split, right? One more time on the split of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, right? Because we got to know these difference between these types of charts, right? Circle mode, unrooted mode, normal mode. You want to look for unrooted so you can get a clear understanding. Right here, this is genetic information. You can see right here, this is the real split, right? Your split is going to be a group of B and A, maybe C with that. And then you're going to have a different group, which is D and E, for the sake of understanding. And one more, and just for clarity, I'll show you a geneticist actually mentioning that these groups are separate. Let me show you here. I'll show you this because it's fairly straightforward information that I think gives a decent summary.
Well, hi everyone. We're going to do things a little differently.
Right here,
this way. And
the hidden history of the world. He basically brings out some of the deep information. Only thing he has a problem with is because he uses the out of Africa idea. So he gets the split of E1B1A and E1B1B way too late because of the false out of Africa idea that he's using. Let me show you right here. I'm gonna go to D and E right here. Watch what it says about D and E.
Civilization. Could it be the original Dravidian peoples? It's mainly Indian and it's very ancient. In the Pacific, and this is something we talked about in episode 16, point in history, A and B, some of the major, they're all one at this point in history. In Africa, there is a division in lineages, but some of the major ones are still joined. A and B are separate from D and E, but A and B have not yet separated. D and E are one.
Did you hear what he just said there? Very important to understand what he just said there. A and B are separate from D and E. That's what all geneticists know when they look at this information. They know that A and D are separated from D and E, right? And we can look at that. We can look at the information, those things and whatnot, and know that we can find different evidences for who they are. So you can see right here, there's the split up here, right? A and B is different from D and E, for sake of understanding. A and B is different from D and E.
One lineage. Of course, D is not going to remain in Africa, except at perhaps a very low frequency. It's going to become the peoples of the great Andamanese Islands, the very dark-skinned people out here, and Japanese, a third of Japan. Right now, it's joined to E, and E, of course, is going to become, part of E, is a branch of E, is going to become the major lineage in sub-Saharan Africa. C has also differentiated at this point. I don't know where to put it, though.
I don't know where to put it either. But you can see right here, A and B, separate. Never been part with D and E. Never been connected. A and B, separate from D and E. Also, note, there's a split right here. You can see the time frame right here is way too late. This is a way too late time frame, and it's because of his out of Africa idea. See how he puts A and B and D and E in Africa? Because it's an out of Africa concept. He's confused with the out of Africa concept, though he does believe in the truth of the gospel. But he's mixed up because of the geneticist perversion of the truth. He probably never seen the paper, or maybe he did. If he did, he's ignorant of it. But it's actually important to understand that he probably didn't see this paper. That is a paper that lets you know that that out of Africa idea is surely false. It's completely false. But he works with the out of Africa concept and had them all come out. So that's what he's working with.
He has separated into E1B, 1B, and E1B, 1A.
And the reason why it's pushed out like this is because he puts A and B in front of E and D. That's actually what he does. That's why E is so late. The split is so late because he doesn't give them their own private branch, which he does say himself that they have a private branch, but he doesn't give them their own private branch, but merge them with A and B. That's the problem that what he just did there. He completely ignored what he already knew. So one more time, just to get a clarity on D and E, what he says right here.
Point in history. In Africa, there is a division in lineages, but some of the major ones are still joined. A and B are separate from D and E, but A and B have not yet separated. D and E are one lineage. Of course, D is not going to remain in Africa, except at perhaps a very low frequency. It's going to become the peoples of the great Andamanese Islands, the very dark-skinned people out here, and Japanese, a third of Japan. Right now, it's joined to E, and E, of course, is going to become, part of E, is a branch of E, is going to become the major lineage in sub-Saharan Africa. C has also differentiated.
So just for clarity, just to sum it all up, what you just seen is without a doubt one of the most deepest studies on this Y haplogroup with the historical information, with linguistics, with biblical information. And this note will be in the description for you to master and know. And if you master and notice, I'm telling you, in time, for the sake of understanding, truly truth will be in your hands, because what you're seeing here is the work of Yah, not no one else's work. All we're doing is examining it and recognizing that the Lord is true and every man is a liar, for the sake of understanding. But the word and the things that he set forth to be discovered are definitely things that we can find. So just for clarity, here is the actual design. One more time here. We'll click this. So these are sub branches breaking off. Just want to show you this one more time for the sake of clarity. So remember, we follow the history and we remember Jews reigned down here in this area right there. All right, Jews reigned down there. Jews. That's not opening. All right, just understand this. E1B is Abraham. He gives you E1B1A and the Ishmaelites, which are E1B1B, which we have a video on that. You're going to see a video on the Ishmaelites. And then you have, because remember, he brings them, Abraham. And then he actually has Isaac. Isaac has two sons, right? Two twins. He has obviously Jacob, M2, E1B1A. And then he has his E1B1C lineage, for the sake of understanding. And that's how we get the full picture of what the Bible is illustrated in the life of the blood. One more time. I just want to go in it on one picture, and that's it. So last piece I want you to see here. I'm just letting it go as it goes. Let me just show you here. Right? That's the split. They know that it's true. It's scientifically recognized. This is the scientifically recognized split. Don't let no one tell you any other split. Any other split is a false narrative, and they know it. The real split is scientifically confirmed, as we just verified as well. Let me go over here and show you something. I want to show you something here. Let me see if it's in fact, I passed it. Let me show you a clear understanding of it. So right here, right? So this is going to be your split. There's going to be other lineages, E2 and things like that. That's going to be a different lineage, right? Your E1A, that's a different lineage too. Your E1B is going to be Abraham. your E1B1, right? That's going to be your Abraham. E1B1, P2, Abraham, bringing forth Ishmael, right here, Ishmael, E1B1B. And then your E1B1A, V38 is Isaac, and he brings forth Jacob and Esau. This is E1, this E1B1A2. This is actually E1B1A or E1B1C for the sake of understanding. M329. And E1B1A1, M2 is Jacob. This is actually Jacob. This is actually what the genetic information reads. And from Jacob comes 12 tribes. Remember how it tells us that from Jacob came 12. So very important to understand. In fact, I was going to end it there, but I'm going to end it on this last piece since I said that little piece of information. Let me make sure I also show this. Just this last piece. At this time, there were 17 haplogroups. Now there are 20. Of the possible 17 haplogroups, 12 were observed in the complete data set with haplogroup A, E1B1A model. For the sake of understanding, that just lets us know that out of all the haplogroups, only E, and specifically E1B1A, has original branches of 12 tribes, for the sake of understanding. So this note will be in the description. This is evidence of the Bible that is the life that is in the blood. So that's what you just seen here. We just climbed a genetic ladder, providing information for who knows generations to come as time is at hand. But we do the work that we need to do for the time that we're in. So E1B1A is indeed Israel. It is Israel for the sake of understanding. So with that, family, do you have any? If you have any questions, let me know now, and I'll touch on them. I'm gonna end the live in 1 minute. Right now it's 3. It says 3:38. I'm gonna end it at. In fact, I'll end at 3:40 for the sake of understanding. But for the clarity, I just wanted you to see this information, and I think that was a thing that I want you to see the rest of this. So I guess for the sake of the ending, I'll let you see the rest of this information on this thing. A little bit of historic information on these things. Obviously, that's going to be longer than a few minutes.
This island is situated. Its location is near Nigeria, Cameroon, and Gabon. Alan H. Godby says that the Portuguese founded the island of São Tomé in 1471. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to establish themselves on the west coast, on the West African coast. They came first as merchants, and secondly as conquerors and slavers. With the influx of 10,000 of black Jews from Spain and Portugal seeking refuge in African ports, Morocco received a great share. In Morocco, there was a revival of Moorish and Jewish science in all areas. So you can see that these black Jews were bringing in the sciences, whether it be alchemy, periodic tables, things of that nature, physics, and all these types of sciences, the knowledge of the astronomies, things like that, the cosmos. All these things were being brought in by the Moorish and the Jewish inhabitants that were coming into those lands of Morocco. Okay, says the Hebrew Academy in Fez, which is in Morocco, competed with the one in Caroun in Algeria. There was many debates and lectures between the sages and the scholars of these schools. Eldad, the Danite, a Hebrew from the Jewish kingdom of Ghana, visited these schools in the 9th century. So many scholars were visiting these schools, and they were able to hear these debates by these learned men, whether sages or scholars of these schools. Okay, we're going to stop right there. Okay, we're going to pick up where we left off. Still in the book, The Untold Story, Revised Edition by Edgar Shaw. And we're picking it up from the paragraph. Says black Jews went to Portuguese colonial possessions in Western Africa, which were Guinea, São Tomé Island, Senegal, Angola, and a few islands near the African coast. Throughout the persecutions in Portugal, thousands of Jews left the country. The Jews were leaving the country in such massive numbers that in 1499 and in 1531, the kings published a law forbidding the new Christians, which were the black Jews, from leaving Portugal without special permits. Cecil Roth wrote that Christian Jews immigrating to the Portuguese colony of Angola in West Africa were agents of the Inquisition and were sent to ferret them out in 1612. So this basically means that there were the Christian Jews that had converted to the Caucasian way of Christianity were sent as agents of the Inquisition to basically bring back those black Jews in those lands of Angola and those southern African lands. It says, it is certain that many black Jews of Portugal, São Tomé, and Angola, who became victims of the Inquisition and Portuguese persecutions, were sold into the slave trade. This Atlantic slave trade lasted more than 400 years, from 1444 to about 1880, in various parts of South America. Some scholars have located black Jews within the whole Niger River Bend. The countries in this territory have contained black African Jews, including the following: Upper Volta, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Togo, Dahomey, and Nigeria. So in recap, you had from the text is telling us that you had those Jews that had sold out to the Caucasian way of Christianity were acting as agents for the crown, which was Ferdinand and Isabella, and taking the true Jews, the ones that were solid to the faith, capturing these Jews, and thus having them deported, captured, and sent into slavery via the transatlantic slave trade. So basically, this is what was going on. Many times we hear that we sold our own people into slavery. I guess according to the text, that's technically true. You did have a great number of Jews that were sellouts that chose to take upon them the customs of the heathen rather than stay true to the faith. And this has always been the case when you read the history of our people, the Israelites in the past, whether it be the Roman Empire or the Greek Empire. There was always a faction of Jews that had wanted to join themselves into the heathen, so to speak. And this was the same situation during these times as well, during the Middle Ages, 1400 all the way up until the 1800s as well. So it looks like you had a great deal of sellouts that had joined the Inquisition against their own people, going into the lands of the Dahomey, the Niger River Bend area, Mali, Angola, places like that, and ferreting out those true Jews who were true to the faith, and consequently having these families sold into slavery.
So very, very deep information that we've seen today for the sake of understanding, family. But as always, this is just evidence for who is Israel. Just because you're not Israel doesn't mean you don't belong to God. Just because your bloodline may not be connected under Abraham doesn't mean that you're not connected with God. Obviously, keep seeking Yah in the spirit. But this is just evidence. What this is evidence of the Bible. What this is actually evidence of the Bible. Obviously, if you're any of these lineages, you're obviously going to be Shemitic, right? You're going to be a Shemite, as there's different branches and everything. But there is a branch that's going to be more led towards Israel, for the sake of understanding, where we get the branch of the Ishmaelites, and then we get the branch of Esau and everything. That's going to be at your E1B1, and then E1B1A, then E1B1 A1. But for the sake of understanding what this information actually is, I want you to save this, because what you just seen here, as we always try to bring out some very, very deep truth, what you just seen here is the truth of the genetic information of Israel. One more time, this is all what you've seen here was linguistic information, biblical information, genetic information, scientific information, as we just seen, and historic information from historians of all shades of color. right? So understand we have E in the land of Israel. We found that in the Natufians. We can find the E lineage. What more do we need when we have all these evidences? When can the world come to the sense of understanding that indeed, without a doubt, that it is proven without a doubt that Israel itself was known in history to be a people that was sit into all nations and fell by the edge of the sword. And Jerusalem right now is being trampled down by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. Is that scripture? Yes, that is Luke, where Messiah actually gives us the understanding there. Even Revelation gives us the understanding. So we're at the end where we're going to see Ezekiel 39 and 23 all the way to the end happen. It's about to happen and come to its end, to its fulfillment. So this link is going to be in the description. I hope that this is well for you, as it was well for me. I think it's important to have great evidence and great insurance of your faith in these things. So this is one of those things. So with that, family, y'all willing, we continue this 3 p.m. Central Time. Y'all willing every day. So with that, this link will be in the description. So be blessed, be beloved, and amen.